Live, okay. I'll call this meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Park Commissioners to order. It's April 21st, 2022. And with me today, I'm President Jim Getz, and we have Vice President Linda Thomas, Commissioner Brad Lindner, and we have via Zoom, good morning, Commissioner Castellini.
Good morning.
Today, this is our agenda for today. So we're gonna try and keep things moving a little bit. But we will first have our first order of business is public comments. And I would like to ask Bob Bergstein, if you would like to come up and have 2 minutes. Welcome and thank you for coming.
I'm glad to be here. My name is Robert Bergstein. I'm the here today representing the Burnett Woods Advisory Council in opposition to the proposed dog park at Burnett Woods. I know you've heard this issue several times anyway, including recently our advisory council passed a resolution in opposition to this, which you should have received, and I hope you did read it. First of all, I would say the advisory council has worked well with a variety of the staff of the parks. Drew Goebel, Greg Torres, Rocky Mertz, Dave Boutel, Crystal Johnson, Crystal Courtney, Michael George. We've worked well with all these people and very happy with our cooperation, their cooperation with us in various projects. I've personally been involved in invasive projects in Burnett Woods and Avon Woods for many years and have led some of the recent projects there, which is nicely organized. The first thing I'd like to talk about is our resolution restates many of the issues that you've heard before. The fact that it's a nice lawn area, the fact that there's trees there, the fact that there's possible sanitation issues, possible parking issues. The appropriateness of the site does not meet the criteria, many of the criteria, 4 of the 7 criteria that the park system decided were relevant for the location of the dog park. As I said, these have been our objections before, and these are still the objections. We have not heard anything in response to these questions and concerns from the park board. I would like to have the park board, not necessarily today, but respond to our concerns, or else attend our next advisory council meeting, somebody respond to our concerns, because we've had no response. That's the first issue I'd like to raise. Is that 2 minutes?
It is.
Okay.
So we appreciate you being here.
I would like to make one more comment.
Okay.
I thought the card said 3 minutes, by the way. The card in front of you says 3 minutes. Doesn't it?
You have another minute.
Okay. The second is the prioritization of this project above other projects. It's a very expensive project. I would guess probably costs $100,000. I'm concerned that this should be a low priority project. We're concerned about the initial cost, where the money is coming from, the maintenance cost, which I don't know where that money is coming from, and I'm not assured that it will be well maintained. The third is the eventual replacement cost for if it's turf or fencing, who's going to fund that? I would say that'd be another $100,000 in 15 years. I'd like to have that. That's one of the specific concerns that I'd like to have addressed to reassure the community that this will be a well-maintained park. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any questions of me.
I'm pleased that we have at least 2 or 3 staff people that do attend every one of your meetings. So we appreciate that. And you obviously will be hearing more about any progress that we make on the dog park. The location was recommended by the staff, so we're pursuing further input from the community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We have a couple people that would like to speak regarding conservation and land management. So Sam Settlemeyer, if you would like to have, and I've been corrected, you have 3 minutes.
All right.
all kinds of time. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Settlemeyer. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Civic Garden Center, in which we work to restore Halleck Botanic Gardens, work closely with staff to maintain and organize work days for Walnut Woods of Evanston Restoration Project. And I'm also a board member for Northside Green Space and an active restoration volunteer here in Cincinnati Parks. I would support the work of the Land Management and Conservation Division and also express my concern for the scale of the problem that we face. The scale of the level of infestation from invasive species is quite overwhelming and truly a problem in every Cincinnati park that I've been to. We work tirelessly, and yet there continue to be more and more invasive species that pop onto the list, and many of these plans take years and years and years of ongoing maintenance and follow-up to really tackle that problem. The scale of the problem in front of us is immense, and yet I have been feeling much more optimistic in the last year thanks to the work of the Land Management and Conservation Division. I believe that they have started to set out a much for this issue in Cincinnati parks. However, they need more and more support. They've done an exceptional job not only trying to do the work, but of trying to organize the community, especially the CPACs that are already doing conservation work, places like Northside Green Space, Burnett Woods, to really bolster the volunteerism and not only encourage it, but to give them the tools that they need to really do this work on a broad scale and to do this work well. However, in an age of shrinking parks budgets and increasingly shortages within staff and everything else, I just want to express my utmost support. We have done a lot to make strides in the last year. There's still so much work to be done, and I hope that that continues to be at the forefront of this commission moving forward. Thank you.
Sam, first of all, thank you for your volunteer work with us, and also thank you for the work you're doing at the Civic Garden Center as well as the Northside Green Space. Those are key partners of the park board, and I think we have a unified mission. And I know this board also feels the passion of maintaining our parks and doing what we can to rid ourselves of invasive species. I know Commissioner Linder is very fond of honeysuckle, but on his spare. But no, thank you very much, seriously, for the work that you're doing as an individual and also your organizations. And I think we're committed to the same mission you are. So thank you. Thanks. And we have Claire Darley.
Not to sound like a broken record, but
It's okay.
I'm a board member of Northside Green Space, and I'm speaking to express our enthusiastic support of the Parks Land Management Plan, and specifically to acknowledge the committed efforts of its authors and key implementers, Drew Goebel and Greg Torres. Certainly in the last 25 years, where Northside Green Space has been an organization, we've collaborated with parks. Badgley Run Preserve was established when the decommissioning of that land by ODOT, and then the establishment of Badgley Run. And 15 years ago, there was a 2-person team from the parks. We could depend on them. They came and they chainsawed honeysuckle, and we ran after them, treating the honeysuckle. And in recent years, Jim Godby was a dependable resource. He responded quickly to our requests for staff to cut trees that had fallen across the trails, and also directing Eagle Scout projects for building bridges across some of the trails that had gotten too much water. But the park board's decision to prioritize management and enhancing the public's use of preserves, it's been the difference between night and day compared to 25 years. The extensive, detailed conservation and land management plan focuses and supports the work of volunteers in clarifying what, when, and where our restoration efforts should be directed. We feel the plan acknowledges our past efforts and encourages our continued future efforts, guided by newly responsible and very responsive parks staff. We're looking forward to the implementation of the trail improvements and signage and recruitment and training of younger crews of volunteers for this labor-intensive work. With COVID, hiking and being in the preserves has just increased dramatically, and it still is continuing. We experience a partnership with parks, and we have long yearned for. We now feel part of a larger effort to restore and preserve the irreplaceable woodland habitats in Cincinnati. Thank you very much for the direction the park board has taken and the resources committed to the conservation and management of these preserves and parks. Thank you very much.
And Claire, thank you too, as we said. Thank you for your volunteer work and the good work that you're doing in Northside as well. There you go. And we do have on our agenda today, we will be focusing on the conservation and land management group. So we'll be delving into that a little bit later in our agenda. We have several comments, or we have 3 speakers today relating to Owl's Nest Park. We also received as a park board that was distributed to all of the commissioners, several emails and correspondence regarding Owl's Nest Park. And before we have our speakers, I would like to ask our director, John Nair, to just make a few comments in advance of our discussion on Owl's Nest.
Thank you, President Getz, and not trying to preempt any comments, but just share some initial reaction. Because probably 10 days, 2 weeks ago, we started hearing some feedback, and last night was distributed on the order of 25, 30, a number of comments, fairly universally saying, we're not happy with the implementation of these posts. I think it was 44 posts that were installed. What I wanted to say, and again, I'm not trying to preempt any comments, but we hear you loud and clear. We understand that the Owl's Nest CPAC is reforming or forming or reforming, and that is a fantastic opportunity to, there is a safety issue, and safety in parks is non-negotiable. And so I don't think anybody disagrees that with the what, but I think the how is the problem, and the how is a great opportunity for us to work with the CPAC to talk about. I drove by this morning just to kind of put a fresh visual in my eyes, and I think there could be some modifications. I don't know if they could be maybe somewhat lower, or if select of them could maybe be replaced with other kind of barriers that are a little more natural nature, be it a flower pot, be it a tree. Can't plant 44 trees in that proximity, they will not survive. That's not a good practice, but if we can selectively make some alterations in consultation with the CPAC, I think that's how we want to see CPACs work. And so I think that's a great opportunity to, as that form. So this is a general plug for CPACs. That is a for duty. I think staff achieve safety unquestionably, but we want to do that in a way that is as agreeable and pleasing to the community and fitting to the park as possible. So I just wanted to share that we heard you and are endeavoring to, are certainly open to making some modifications, and want to reach out and work with the community on what those modifications look like and how those get implemented over. We're not talking about years, we're talking about a period of months, a single number of months. Increase the appeal, decrease the lack of appeal that folks have expressed about the current situation.
Thank you, John. And also, it brings back to the board as well. We will use this as an example to try and look at our processes and our procedures. I know that we will work closely with staff to determine how in the future we can ensure that we are aware of the broad aspects of things that we are doing as changes in our parks. We try as a board not to micromanage our park staff. We have excellent staff people. What our role is to ensure that we have community input. So we will ensure that we do that going forward. You know, we also want to make sure that we put into place procedures or just a roadmap for how we will respond to input that we get from the community. So I assure you that also is being looked at in light not of just the Owl's Nest issue, but of every issue that we hear that comes before the park board. So with that, I know we have 3 speakers. Ray, would you like to go first?
Sure. Good morning, I'm Ray Buick with the Alznes Park Advisory Council in the East Walnut Hills neighborhood. We certainly understand the safety issue. We are the ones who brought the issue to the attention of staff and the park board years and years ago that people were parking near the picnic area in Alznes Park. Although I find the solution that came up with to be inappropriate, reactionary, and just plain ugly. I understand that you needed consistency across different parks that have this same issue, but I find that justification a bit mind-boggling because number one, what may be appropriate in a rustic setting like Burnett Woods is certainly may not be appropriate in the historic business district setting of Alznes Park. And number two, I think we all know that there are some parks in this city for which that solution would not even be considered. And that kind of stings. So another reason that we heard was cost, which we completely understand, but this looks more like a lack of creativity and engagement than a lack of funding. We've asked for years that staff replace the metal bollard that is at the trail in the bus stop that leads to the picnic area, and that you perhaps add a few more attractive bollards, perhaps the bicycle kind, to encourage some bicycling instead of the cars in that same area of the bus stop, because this is where people are accessing the park, because no cars can park there like they do along the rest of the frontage of Owl's Nest. And parking is at a premium in O'Brienville. So there is really not that many opportunities for people to jump the curb at any other spot besides that bus stop. We've asked for signage, simple signs telling people where they can park and not to park on the lawn. And we've suggested that you move the giant pots, if needed, into strategic locations along that frontage to block cars from entering. But the haphazard fence posts that gave no thought to the history or the aesthetics of not just our park, but our business district and the entrance to our entire community is truly unacceptable. And we are happy that you are reconsidering, and we ask that you work with us to find a more appropriate solution.
Thank you. And we have Kate Walker.
Thank you for speaking, Mr. Nair, because that kind of reinforces the thought that that could be looked at as taking a different way of creating safety. And I go through O'Brienville frequently. I'm a resident of the area of Walnut Hills for 30 years. And what I notice, it's not the safety of people going into the park, it's the safety of people coming through O'Brienville at 40 and 50 miles an hour. It's a 25-mile-an-hour speed through there. The posts are huge. They act as a barricade, not as something that's inviting you to come into the park and enjoy. And so I do hope that you'll find another way to take some of those posts down, make it more creative and inviting to the community. And also, I think we need to hear from you all first before something like that happens. Yeah.
Appreciate
that's
that.
it. Thank you.
And Benjamin Strom.
Hello, my name is Ben Strom. I am a board member on the East Walnut Hills Assembly. Thank you very much for having us. I am a little aware of the budgetary constraints that the park has worked within. You have so many projects and a limited budget, and we as a community understand a little bit of that. But weirdly, what I would like to bring up is that what happened with the fence posts appeared to be just another dot on the trend line of what happened with its original plan for demolition. We as a community were woken up one day to large bulldozers and demolition vehicles at the gates of Owl's Nest Park back last summer. And in December, it was in a meeting like this where there was a very clear commitment to understanding, how did this happen? How do we not let this how do we not let this happen again? And how do we create systems that minimize this happening? We then woke up another day with large fence posts that the community has not enjoyed. So I just really wanted to bring forth how have the systems that you mentioned started to change or iterate or grow to minimize this from happening again? Because it happened once with its demolition, which is its worst case. It's now happened with its renovation in a second iteration of worst case. So I just would like to ask, what are the systems that are changing? How, I'm on the advisory committee council with Ray and others. There was no input from the posts, and I understand you're fulfilling an obligation for safety and other aspects. You're working on the hit list of projects. It just doesn't appear. I mean, there was a very clear commitment back in December, the December meeting, that there was going to be a consultant hired. There was going to be clear communication channels. There were going to be aspects that were going to enable systems that prevented this from happening again. And I know that there was a consultant in a work and other things that you might mention later today. It just doesn't appear from my small anthill that I'm living on that the systems have changed. And it appears that if we don't change, we're going to find another situation like this happening again and again and again. And then more people will show up and then systems will be changed. And I just would like to see some change versus hear of thoughts of change. Thank you very much.
And Ben, I'll answer your question. Obviously, the system isn't working. And obviously, our commitment that we made back as we encountered the demolition of the pavilion, I would have hoped by this time that we would have tuned our processes to the point that this would not occur again. It has. So obviously, I know for me, last night reading the 30-some or 40-some emails that came in, it's abundantly clear that they're not working. And I can assure you that this board is going to make sure that we put processes in place where we are responsive in advance to the neighborhoods. We have been, and I commend Rocky Merce in working with our CPAC groups. We have doubled down on our interest in reactivating a lot of our CPACs across the city. Those parks that don't have the degree of concerned neighbors, we are pushing to have a CPAC formed for the other parks because of this situation. It's hard for us to know changes that are made in the parks, what will rise to a level of extreme feedback from the neighborhood, pro or con. So we will do our best, and we will make a commitment to you that we will put processes in place, and it's now up to us for action versus words. And so we hear you, and I will assure you that we're going to do our best to make that happen.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little tiny bit of communication on the front end goes a very, very long way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. We also had a large degree, it was Community Input Month with the Park Board. So I just wanted to identify some of the other input that we received. We do circulate all of these to the staff as well as to all the commissioners. We heard from the public on a request for additional restrooms at Smale Park down on the riverfront. We were brought an issue to our attention of dumping that was taking place in the roadways around and through Mount Airy Forest. We had emails concerning illegal activity at Mount Echo. We had input from the Sailor Park Community Council, which we appreciated, regarding Nelson Park and opportunities that they would like to see at Nelson Park. Crone Conservatory pricing was brought to our attention. As we heard this morning, we continue to get input, both pro and con, on a dog park in Clifton. We've heard issues at Eden Park. We, besides the barricade issue at Owl's Nest, we also had questions raised about where are we on the process of the stabilization of the pavilion in Owl's Nest Park. We had input on Mount Airy Forest trails and the need for maintenance of the trails and perhaps expansion and development of a marathon route of trails in Mount Airy. And we've had, on the positive side, a number of emails echoing what we heard this morning on accolades to our Conservation and Land Management Group. So we were glad to hear those as well. So all of those things, as I said, are inputs to the park board. You can see that we have issues all over the parks, different issues at different levels. And we are putting our emphasis on how we give feedback to the community and how we systematically ensure that we do responses and we do we take action on those things that deserve the action of the park board. So with that, we're going to move on to a slight change in our agenda. I'd like to have Director Nair introduce some people to us.
Thank you very much, President Getz. This is something that was previously done and has sort of lapsed over a period of time, but I think everyone who joins the Parks team as a full-time associate should be introduced to the board. Parks does not render all of our service community solely by the folks in this room. It's 180 some odd folks who are on a daily basis working on and in the parks, and so we want to recognize every member of that team as they join our team. And that's going to take a while in May, but in April we have two to recognize. The new division manager for planning and design, Joel Gross, is with us today. So. Can you give us a moment of how you came to be here?
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joel Gross. I'm the new division manager of planning and design. I'm a 15-year civil and environmental engineer with a great passion for our parks. Definitely wanted to come in and try to help with some of these issues. Sat through a whole lot of municipal meetings in my previous life and totally understand the importance of all of these parks to the city of Cincinnati. And I'm going to do my best to do a great job in helping keep the parks great and make them even better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Joel, we most certainly welcome you.
And Evan Schmidt joins our facilities team as an HVAC specialist. Yep. And thank you for joining us this morning. Evan, if you can tell us a little bit how you came to be here as well.
I'm new to the city, so first in the private sector, working industrial and commercial heating and air. Trained for about the last 4 or 5 years. And saw the opening, interviewed. It's a great team. Everyone's been great so far. Just playing catch up, getting a lot of buildings. Without being here guy for a year or so just kind of running crazy.
Outstanding.
And Evan, where did you move from?
I'm Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah, grew up on the west side.
Gotcha.
Still there, so.
Well, welcome. We appreciate your joining the team. We welcome you.
Other obligations for today. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings if you if it's hot in another room. Don't feel the need to attend all day. But just wanted to make sure we got a chance to introduce you to some of the other members of the team.
Thank you very much. Our first order of business is approval of our meeting minutes. We had 2 sets of minutes from March 17 meeting and then also March 24th, a special meeting that we had. We have minutes from them. I would like to personally thank our Vice President, Commissioner Thomas, for the input. Linda took a lot of time and went through and has been working on some minor changes, but I appreciate your leadership in making sure our minutes are concise and reflect what our discussions were. I assume we've had opportunities to review them. Are there any corrections, changes to either set of minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Second, thank you. We do have, since Commissioner Castellini is joining from remote, we will have to do voice votes today. So Tia, if you would.
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Thank you very much. Those minutes are approved unanimously. Our next item of business is a quarterly police report, and Captain Swingley, welcome again, and we appreciate the thorough report. If you could give us the takeaways that you'd like us to focus on.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the Parks Department liaison. So you said everyone got a packet of information.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go over the highlights. So when comparing calls for service for the first quarter of 2021 compared to 2022, citywide, there was a 2.6 decrease in calls for service. When comparing the parks calls for service, there was a 6.3 decrease, again, between the first quarter of 2021 and 22. When looking at the differences between the last two quarters, the last quarter of 2021 and this quarter, there was a 25% decrease in calls for service, which I attribute to that, to a lot to the weather over the winter months. We're looking at the top 10 parks in terms of calls for service. Eden Park has moved to number 1 for this past quarter from number 4 from the previous quarter of 2021. Even though calls for service in Eden Park has gone up, overall calls for service are down compared to last year. So the 3 types of calls for service in this past quarter is 911 calls, people calling 911 for the police, and self-initiated activity by police officers coming upon hazards and conducting investigations. Theft is the most frequent offense. Theft from autos and people leaving things on the ground and walking away and things being stolen. So I encourage everyone to lock their cars, don't leave their keys in their car, and hide your valuables in your trunk. So we work with the Parks Department and feedback from them and the community and our neighborhood liaison officers. So we encourage increased signage, especially at the entry points of secluded trails. Like, for example, in Stanberry, some people just cut not in the traditional path of people entering the park, but they go behind the shelters and camp in the woods. And I think it's good maybe to have a couple of additional signs, say no camping. That way, when the officers show up, you point to the sign and you walk past the signs to please leave. And we did respond to Mount Echo Park. I know a citizen brought this to the Parks Department. We conducted directed patrols, and we're going to be attending the next Zoom meeting with Mr. Eric Brewer, who's the president of the Mount Echo Advisory Board. So hasn't been any arrests. We've done directed patrols, so we're going to continue to focus on that area. And if there are no questions, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I know across the city, there's an increased focus on illegal dumping. So I know that was another comment that we received related to Mount Airy Forest. So we appreciate your response to some of these inputs that we've gotten from the community.
So I made a note of that, and I know the lady brought up speeding in Ryanville on Madison Road. I'm the commander of the traffic unit, so I'm going to go back and tell the traffic unit commander to focus some attention during this stretch of Ryanville. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you, Captain. Are there any questions for them? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll move into our action items, and Director, the first item we have is the biochar update.
Indeed, I'm going to ask Crystal to speak to that. Crystal, the Director of Division of Natural Resources.
You do it? Okay, you got this. All right. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for having me. I've been working on this project for some time now. Finally able to bring it to you and kind of talk through our discovery process over the past 3 months. So just to begin with some background. So as you know, we presented to the board in August, and with that, August of 2021, and with that kind of introduced the plan that we were working through with Bloomberg. So in 2015, Stockholm won the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge to implement a biochar production facility. That has gone so well that Bloomberg has done a second round that is very specific to that project. In March of last year, we were one of 10 cities in the world chosen to do a feasibility study with Bloomberg. And so we spent 6 months working through all the details of, how much do we need to produce? And in order to make this a break-even cost, where can we produce it? What park sites are most conducive to doing so? And with that, put together kind of a full plan. In September of last year, we presented that plan to Bloomberg in a second round of grant funding. And we were one of 6 cities in the world chosen.
We're close to the story.
So we were one of 6 cities in the world, of those 10, chosen to implement the project. And with that came a round of funding from Bloomberg, as well as some partnerships with MSD and some other folks, as well as the park board, to try to reach the dollars that we needed for the full project. And so just to go into what is biochar, just to reiterate what we've already gone through back in August, but essentially this is a modern climate change solution with an ancient agricultural practice. So what's been done in the equator areas with slash and burn, they would, use the char in order to fortify the land and then use that for agricultural gain. And so what does that look like for us? Essentially, we are going to take the waste from urban forestry in the form of wood chips and utilize that, as well as wood chips from local tree care companies, to essentially turn that, what would become and break down and release carbon, what was at one time a waste product will now be utilized and put right back into the soil. So essentially closing the loop on our carbon sequestration of our forest. And so with that, there is a potential that we will continue to explore for this to be a kind of carbon capture, carbon crediting program. 80% of the carbon that is locked up in the wood material, 80% of that carbon is retained as it comes through the biochar production facility. And then as that char is then reincorporated into the soil, it increases the carbon holding capacity of the soil itself. So the first state in the nation to do this has been California, and that just started last year. So they're kind of leading the way on that front. And we'll continue to work with the Office of Environmental Sustainability and some of our council members to really kind of explore that option. But with this, the very detailed analysis of what it actually takes to make biochar and really going through what does the market look like in our area. Whenever the biochar is dumped into the machine, slowly processed through the machine, and then comes out the other side, it's a raw product. And so that raw product can then be sold to farmers, folks that are doing compost work, folks that have horses, the zoo that has a bunch of animals and a lot of poo, can take that raw carbon, that raw biochar, mix it with their organics, and then it speeds up that breakdown process. And then that compost is then sold off as a soil amendment. The other option is to fortify it. So essentially that would be us taking our green waste, our compostable materials throughout parks, and incorporating that with biochar and essentially charging the biochar. And then that char can then be incorporated back into the soil. If we were to take raw biochar and put it in the soil, it would actually pull the nitrogen, pull the resources from the soil and away from the trees in order to charge itself. So the fortified material is actually sold as a landscape product. Arborists from around the area, as well as various plant care nurseries, things of that nature, are incorporating it into their soil mix as a fortified product, essentially as a replacement for that organic material that they would be adding, or the compost material that they would be adding.
So if I could interrupt, so why would we even propose developing and producing just raw char if it isn't a positive for using around the trees?
So essentially, you're always going to be you will have raw char no matter what. It is the first product that comes out. The second phase of that is fortifying. And so with the option of sales, potential revenue generation with this, there are specific industries that will want the raw biochar, and then there are specific industries that will want the fortified biochar. So it'll give us a suite of options as far as what we can sell.
What is then those who would want the raw biochar, if you're saying it's not good as a nutritional add alone for trees, what is the market then for raw char?
So for example, right now we have an intent to purchase from Go Zero. And so that's a compost focused organization. So they are collecting and they have kind of this bulk of, basically organic waste. And if they allow that to break down, it takes, months. You add char to it, it takes weeks. So it just speeds up the process there. And as well as like with the zoo, we've been in conversations with Mark Fisher there. They have a huge waste issue where they're shipping that stuff off site. They're trying to figure out how to retain that on site and actually put it back into the botanical gardens. And so this is a potential option for them.
Okay, so raw char would typically then be sold for an interim step of mixing with another waste stream, so to speak, for a final product. Does MSD have a market then for raw char? Would they be interested in raw char?
With MSD, it's going to be kind of a mix of both. So the raw char within is the other aspect of raw char is that it also is it absorbs water and holds water. And so from a stormwater standpoint, what we're seeing throughout the nation is that it's being included in these best practices that they're installing both in the right of way and on large lands, just as a soil amendment in order to increase the porosity of the soil.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
It's a different purpose for MSD. They're not trying to grow things.
That's one
Just
purpose.
retain water.
That's one purpose of MSD is like, that's one of the suite of options for them. The other is, excuse me, when we do get into, our soil cells, our bioretention areas within the right of way where we're actually trying to use vegetation as a means to absorb the water and filter the water. That's when we would also use that fortified product. So then that also increases the survivability of that plant material, as well as increasing the porosity of that soil. So it functions in both directions.
Great, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a sense of what the break is, the raw char versus the processed one that is the end result of our process, the process you're talking about? Because it sounds like if there is a larger market for raw char, then the processing on our end would be reduced. So what is that balance?
So throughout the financial analysis, we've kind of ran it in both directions, right? We've determined that, and this is kind of like the purpose of being here. So far, we have the funds necessary to purchase a production facility with one train. Versus having two trains, which would double production. And so, I'm sorry, will you repeat your question?
I'm looking for, based on my understanding, there are two products of this process. One is raw, and there are certain applications for that.
Yes.
There is a continuing process that makes the product usable for things like growing trees, putting back in the ground. That process is another step.
Yes.
So if we just look at what is the market for raw, which is the first part of the process, is that a bigger market or a smaller market? Or are they about equal? That's what I'm asking.
I would say they'd probably be about equal, and that'll be a big part of the next phase of this is getting the operator. And so the next phase is really getting the person who's going to operate the machine, manage it every day, handle the end product as in like super sacks, so selling it in bulk, and then building the market locally. So currently our intents to purchase, one is from Garrick, which is a landscape company. So Garrick is interested in that fortified product. Go Zero is another intent to purchase. And this is before we even have the production facility, right? And their interest is in that raw char. And so I think that this is just something that we have to massage through. Currently the industry, arboriculturally, and in my experience, because I would be utilizing that fortified product in my industry, in arboriculture. And I know that locally there's a very high demand for that. What they're doing now is they're purchasing it from, Lowe's or these landscape companies like Garrick. And essentially, at a pound, you're paying about $15 a pound. If we're selling it to Garrick in a ton, then we're looking at about, $1,500 a ton. So there's the marketability is wide, right? Whether you're going bulk or retail. And then as far as working through and massaging through all of that kind of business plan, that's what I was getting at, is we've looked at at producing raw biochar and just selling it raw. We know that we can at least break even and make revenue in order to at least cover the cost of any repairs that need to be done to the facility. So it would pretty much just stay within that production facility versus going through the composting route, which will increase operational cost. All of that has been kind of massaged out as well. And so with that, we are looking at a huge return on investment if we're selling it at 100% fortified.
That was what I was trying to get at.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think the likely outcome is that we want to sell as much as we can fortified because it's believed to be 3 times the value. But there is some market, especially from initial partners, for raw because of the different use of it that way. But I think 3 years downstream, you want to sell as much as you can fortified because it maximizes the return on investment and maximizes the return on the non-financial return on investment. You're doing the best to it for the most trees, but there's always some market for raw.
Yes.
You're making raw regardless, and for certain uses that prefer the product by the nature of it. So, but that market mix, that mix of saleable has to be determined as the market flushes out further.
So let's back up a little bit, because you said the reason you're here today is to ask for an additional 500,000 to ensure we have 2 trains.
Yes, sir.
If we only had the 1 train, how much would you be asking for today? Yeah, I thought we closed the doors.
Numbers. So with 1 train, the production facility, site prep, operation and sales portion, and with current rep, that cost would be $825,000.
Versus, how much is it 2 trains?
We're looking at 1.2 million.
Okay.
And so the difference in that is about, we would still be asking for about $100,000 for 1 train.
Okay, so it's a $400,000 delta. You would ask for $400,000 more for the 2nd train.
Yes, sir.
And that question of 1 train versus two trains has nothing to do with raw char versus young fortified or fortified, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
So the additional cost has nothing to do with the end product. It's just a matter of volume.
Yes.
Okay.
And then having that volume gives us the suite of options to go from raw to mid-grade to high grade.
So yeah, okay.
So the call it direct cost or labor, if I recall, to do 1 train, which basically keeps you kind of at a break-even point, maybe not, versus 2 trains. There's really very little incremental additional labor to process the 2 train volume versus the 1 train.
So in my calculation, the difference was about, it's about $100,000 difference. And that's looking at the amount of product that you're having to move, the amount of supplies that you need in order to capture that product and sell it. So that, and the 2 trains, you're also looking at, because you're running the machine harder, where you included that contingency cost of about 20% within the operational piece in order to cover any issues that may come with the machine itself. And so that's basically the big breakdown that I did between those 2 trains. And then when you get into fortifying the product, you're looking at about a $200,000 increase from a 1 train operation raw biochar.
And that is what? Is that mostly labor? What about the additional capital to do that 2nd step?
So really it's taking just doing it raw, we would be producing it, putting it in, kind of a bulk bag, and then that would be transported off site. By mixing it with compost on site, it'll have to essentially go from the production facility down to where the compost is being held, mixed and managed and then packaged. So it's mostly going to be that labor, it's the labor intensive cost associated with that.
Different packaging though for a fortified product than the raw.
Potentially, it could still be sold in a super sack that can hold, about a half a ton.
But that's to commercial users, and you're not going to get your max value out of that versus selling it by a 5-pound bag or something like that.
Exactly, or by, the yard, have a dump truck come and you load them up with yards of biochar versus tons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be getting into, you're not looking at getting into kind of consumer bag size packaging. It would either be bulk in a bag, a big bulky bag, or it would be bring your pickup truck and we'll dump a yard into the back of that.
Yeah, I haven't really, most of what I've been focusing on is that bulk sale. Because once you get into retail and you're looking at, a pound or a 5-pound bag, that's a whole different kind of
I would
function.
advise not to do that.
Yeah.
I think you should buy a bag with the honest poop from the zoo.
Yeah.
At a very high level.
And so ultimately there's lots of potential here, and you can sell, Lowe's is selling a bag of biochar that's fortified for $15 a pound. I mean, that's a return, that's a $30,000 ton, so.
It wouldn't necessarily, in the future, you could still do that option, I guess, if you had the space and there was a willingness or good business model.
Absolutely. And, I'm a public servant. I never thought I would be in a situation where I'm building a business plan for the sale of a product and, the return on investment for that product. It's been a great experience, but I know that I still have a lot to learn. And for me, I learn best doing it hands-on. And so at this point, what I'm really just trying to do is ensure that I have the capital, the investment up front in order to ensure success. Whether just selling it raw. Once you start to get into that fortified product, I think it opens up a whole suite of options. I think that this is something that we can continue to explore with our operations manager, who will be, kind of out there soliciting and building the local market and the statewide market. We're pretty much would be the only, production facility in not only in the region, but throughout the state. The other production facilities that they have throughout the state are kind of these kiln-based small operations that are used right there on the farmer's site. And so this really kind of opens up, I think, a market that the city doesn't currently have, the region doesn't currently have. And so there's still a lot of kind of questions there as to, we know that the demand is there. We know that people are currently purchasing it from landscape companies, from Lowe's, from all these other entities. But when we start getting into producing it as a city entity, I mean, that in and of itself, you're closing the carbon gap on the urban forest, and you're buying that product. If I'm a landscape company and I'm selling a product and I'm selling Cincinnati Parks biochar, that's a markup right there, let alone partner with.
Crystal, I think what you may be hearing, unfortunately, you're in the unwelcomed position of sitting in front of some board members who made a career out of taking things, and mine was just scrap metal that went from raw scrap into little things after being processed for recycling. And Mr. Lindner obviously has a little experience in packaging for the retail side. We've already committed $100,000 to the project, so you're asking us for $500,000 more.
Yes,
so the reason why you're getting the questions today is that I think it's a great environmental and a great program. We just have to make sure when we're looking at a $600,000 investment of park money, that's why we're questioning some of the logistics here. And I know you and I had the same discussion. My concern, I think, Brad, was the same type of thing, is that I get the raw production, it's there and you ship it out. When you add the additional step or the additional process of fortifying it, then you have to take the logistics that come into play, taking it from that end site, moving it somewhere to actually then do the mixing and then loading and then shipping out from there. I had a hard time reconciling the cost estimates with that additional phase of process that needs to happen to get beyond the raw chart.
My
Jim?
understanding, though, is, I'm sorry.
Jim? I'm
Yes,
just-
Susan, I'm sorry.
It's hard to raise my hand. But is this an area where we might partner with the county parks, great parks, in looking for this additional monies and having them invest the 500,000? Because wouldn't they be in the market for using this product as well?
Well, that's an excellent question, Commissioner, and I had the same question in the initial write-up that we had on the biochar product. It said that the stakeholders were looking for additional partners to partner in the process. Have we been successful in finding other groups like that that would participate with us?
So
Stakeholders.
yes, sir. I'm connected with the Natural Resources Division in Hamilton County Parks, and they are currently purchasing biochar from local landscape companies and using that within their plantings. And so I have always kind of seen them as a potential buyer of the product. As far as partnership on upfront cost, I didn't explore that because whenever I had first brought this to our CFO's attention, this was the direction that I was given to, pursue Fund 752 versus, well, my original ask was, can we do like a bond or something like that to where we can pay for this over the 10-year lifespan of the machine? And so he said, well, let's try this step first. And so that's where we're at. And if this step is not the correct action, because I have to come to you to determine whether or not this is the direction that we're going, then I can continue to explore further partnerships for the funding. It'll just push out the timeline, which is doable.
So, just the couple of comments. One of which is that initial upfront cost is roughly a one-time cost. Then you have your operating costs that you incur, every day, every year.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that there's an incremental increase in the operating costs having 2 trains versus 1 train,
Mm-hmm.
but you double your capacity with 2 trains versus 1 train. So the difference, you've not, kind of increased, I don't know what the term would be, linearly, the operating cost associated with the increased volume. So you gain efficiency
Mm-hmm.
by using a little bit more labor to produce effectively twice the volume of product. I mean, that's kind of the fundamental understanding that I see. So to me, it's, and back to the, kind of revenue generating opportunity, your cost of biochar per ton or whatever at 2 trains is ultimately cheaper than at 1 train, because you've got no more opportunity at 1 train to grow your volume. With 2 trains, you can sell, sounds like pretty much whatever you produce.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very compelling argument for 2 trains versus 1, because we gotta suck it up. Somebody does anyway to come up with the extra $400,000 or $500,000. But years 2, 3, 4, whatever, you've got an opportunity really to get a much better return on that than $500,000 through that increased capacity from the 2nd train.
Yes, sir. Yeah, even just selling it raw, working with Craig to determine the ROI, it was 22.3%.
You have at the location composting, because to Jim's point, you don't want to haul this all over, God's green earth to marry it up. So, but you have composting capacity at the location.
Yes.
So you can just take it over there and dump it and mix it in.
We have the capacity, but we will have to build the system. Currently, Parks Green Waste is either dumped at Sinton or Deal or in a dumpster. So this would essentially take Parks Green Waste at collection points that would then have to be moved to Deal Road where it would be processed.
And the composting process, is that, call it an unsophisticated or non-mechanized, just pile it up and let it cook and then turn it periodically to keep it cooking and so on. It's not something like this that is a composting machine.
Right, we're looking at two different methods for composting, both the unmechanized method and then a compost tea method. And that would have a mechanism where it would essentially be kind of like batch cooked, and then you would use the tea to fortify the direct product.
The char.
So you're still selling just char versus when you mix it with compost, you have, 40% of that material is going to be the organics.
Composted stuff, right?
Exactly.
So from a marketing point of view, what's more desirable out there? What, to Linda's point, what is your sales mix? Is it going to be so much raw, so much composted, and so much tea, or is that just too far out in that distance?
No, I think it's a good question. And from a marketability standpoint, it all depends. There are so many markets that can touch this product, right? And so from that fortified product, that could be sold to soil mixing companies, right? That would use it in their special mixes, and then they would mark up that price versus a company that may want to come in and buy our composted material. Ultimately, what we would want to be using is that composting material to feed back into our plantings. And so where that compost tea is kind of like the creme de la creme, that compost mix with biochar is going to be really like what we're using, our boots on the ground are going to be using in our horticulture beds and throughout our streetscapes.
So who would be the user of the tea version?
So from my understanding, you can sell it individually, and then small packages, right? Yeah, pounds, and then it can be used. There's different methods now that are happening to like decompact the soil around trees using an air compressor, essentially, and then arborists can come back in and kind of sprinkle that in whatever was blasted out, right? Versus if you're doing a new planting, you would want to have that organic material to essentially supplement the organics that you would have within your backfill. And so there's just different applications for the different products depending on the industry itself.
But the tea would be potentially for commercial and residential use.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that would be my intention. And with that, there are a lot of grants out there specifically for composting. When we were trying to find grants to help fund this project, the appetite wasn't there. From the Ohio EPA and our local soil and water conservation districts, they're more interested in minimizing the amount of green waste and actually composting. So that's kind of the next phase in order to fund that part of the project. Will be going after those EPA dollars, going after the solid waste dollars from the county, and they're out there, as well as research grants. So that's another piece of this project that we're working on kind of in the background is, what does success look like? And for us, it's a healthy tree, right? It's a tree that is growing better now using this product versus not using it. And so we have a research partnership with UC where they're going to be actually measuring the growth of the tree, the carbon sequestration of the soil, all those different elements of a biochar planting versus a non-biochar planting. And so there's lots of different, I feel like this is going to be a pretty amazing project overall. And add to that the research that can be done from the stormwater standpoint in partnership with MSD. And so even in talking with MSD, they have the funds that they have allocated to us basically they have $500,000 to play with every year for new and upcoming best practices, kind of like pilot projects. And so we were one of their pilot projects that were chosen. And speaking to their leadership team, if this is successful, we have that opportunity for years to come. And so it kind of gives us the ability to grow and play in a sustainable manner that I feel like ultimately it's really going to continue to put Cincinnati on the international map.
But one train, your future is very limited because
it's half capacity.
You're going to be sold out effectively, and you have no real growth opportunity to do what you're talking about or to kind of expand that. How easy would it be to add a third train 5-10 years from now? Do you have to get a whole nother rig, or can you just?
So that's why I wanted to do this from the beginning, is that it's about a 30% cost difference to add it after the fact, versus, purchasing the facility with all those components already built in.
But that system, will that only handle 2 trains?
It can handle up to 5.
Okay.
Mhm.
And again, I'm the financial guy.
I appreciate you all. All these questions are great.
When I look at your numbers
Mhm.
and where we have an investment up front of $1.2 million, with raw biochar on an ongoing basis, forget about the initial capital infrastructure to build the thing. On an annual basis, raw char does not cover itself. It's not a break even. It is a loss leader, so to speak. We don't make money on operations year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Over the 6-year period, after we invest $1.2 million up front, after 6 years, we've only generated positive cash flow of $32,000.
Mhm.
So said differently, on just the market for raw char, we will spend $600,000 as park board and get nothing back. We've invested $600,000 in producing this raw biochar.
Mhm.
Environmentally, we've done something very good.
Exactly.
What I'm struggling with is $600,000 of the limited capital we have to produce something that we don't get any return on. And after 6 years, when you go to the fortified, you do start in year 2. So again, after your investment building, year 1, we lose money. Year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, we actually turn a profit, so to speak, positive cash flow on the sale of the young fortified.
Mhm.
But after it takes 6 years to generate $500,000 of positive. So what I'm saying is that after 6 years, we've recouped our $500,000 additional investment into this, but nothing else. So when you go then to your fortified, that's where you start making money. That is where you get a return of the $500,000 at the end of year 2, based on your assumption of being able to sell fortified biochar at $1,500 a ton.
Mhm.
That you start making real money on.
Yeah.
So I think the issue that we have, again, from my perspective, it comes down to the business plan. In my mind, I don't even know why we would do the raw char where we can't even on an annual basis break even on that. Obviously then with doing the fortified, young fortified and fortified, you start getting a product then that you can make some money on.
Mhm.
But there again, I'm questioning the whole logistics end of that additional process. What is the additional process that we have to do? Because this capital infusion here is only for the initial biochar production. And then you've got the whole second process of fortifying it to get to where it gets to be profitable for us to do it. And again, I cringe saying this because we are not a for-profit corporation here. But the question in my mind comes, at what point does $600,000 investment make sense out of park board money?
Can I interrupt one more minute?
Yes, Susan.
First of all, in California, they have this going, correct? It's not just an experiment there.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a successful process and a successful
Yes,
business.
ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it works. We know it works.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Have we studied their, what I call downstream process then? Are they doing fortified? Is somebody doing fortified biochar today, California or anywhere?
Yes, sir.
have we looked at their downstream process? How did they take it? How did they do it? How do they take it from the raw coming out at the end of the box? How do they take it then and fortify it, package it, and sell it?
Much like I described. So they would mix the raw biochar with a compost, or they would be adding compost tea to the biochar itself and selling biochar or a compost biochar mix.
And in my mind, I'm thinking of a cement mixer to mix the stuff. You're saying that we don't need that can be done
with a Bobcat
manually, mixing it that way.
It would just be packaging it that would, I think, would be the challenge. If you're gonna go into a 5-pound bag or a bulk bag, it should be much easier, I would think, than a small little.
And I don't think there is an anticipated vision at this time of when you want to go into retail packaging. It would be bulk purchase, dump it into a landscaper's dump truck or super sack kind of purchase. I think that could happen downstream, but there's no projection or contemplation into the financial assumptions of that. And I do think there is one user for which you would stop at raw, and that would actually be for MSD for water retention. That I don't think it's the highest and best use of the product, but it is in their mind, and if they're an early supporter or partner, you need to be responsive to their thoughts. So I think for that spot, they're actually in some cases better with raw biochar, I believe, than with the enhanced product. But for the most part, the best gains are realized the more refined and processed you have it. But the process is mixing with the Bobcat extensively.
Exactly. And honestly, whenever I first started digging into these operational costs versus sales versus what we would use internally versus paying back MSD and looking at what we have production wise with one train, I automatically saw that we would be operating in the red. And so that's where I was like, all right, well then what does 2 trains look like? Reached out to the company, got the quotes on it, try to understand what that looks like, adding it down the line versus now. And so I spent a lot of my time at this point just focusing on what is it going to take to get this machine up and running in order for us to break even annually. And so over the course of the next year, as we build out the site development and the community engagement and all these other pieces, building that that marketability of this product is what we're going to be doing between now and by the time that the machine is up and running. So I feel like there's still going to be a good year of market analysis, of building that market in order to get this to reach our production goals. So we have the preliminary business plan with all of these, kind of assumptions built in based on market research and what other cities are doing around the world. And that's pretty much where this business plan comes from, is that kind of research. But what's it going to look like locally is really what we're going to have to dig into over the next year. And I'll tell you, our goal is to be extremely successful. And based on what I've seen, even selling it raw, we're at least have a minimal return on investment that will basically build enough capital to take care of the machine, right? To take care of any issues that we may run into and replacement of that machine down the line. But whenever you start to get into fortified, then you really are able to, build a pot of revenue to not only replace the machine and handle all the operations, but even have supplemental income in order to plant trees where we need to plant trees outside of the right of way and on CRC and CPS properties where we know we need to increase canopy for the good of our community, but currently don't have a mechanism to do so.
I just caution you that I personally, I could be very, very wrong, but I personally, going through the numbers, don't see it as raw char generating any revenue. It's a loss. We're funding the first 6 years by the upfront contribution of $500,000 that you're asking for today. Because the $200,000 that MSD is giving us upfront, as upfront money, is an upfront purchase of the material. So we're paying them back. So taking out what we're paying them back for that $200,000, we don't make money on the balance of the material being able to be sold to third parties.
What's the time frame that MSD wants their $200,000 back in biochar? Did they specify?
No.
Well, let's just
and-
triple whatever they're asking.
And right now, this was the way that I thought through it. And in speaking to representatives that I'm working with to develop the MOU with MSD, to finalize that piece of it, this was the proposal that I put forward. Was we know that we have projects that we want to incorporate this in order to show that this is it's a good pilot. It's a good move for MSD to be incorporating biochar. Whether or not it's the full 500 tons or 200 tons, that hasn't been exactly fleshed out. And
Well,
I
I think
honestly
to
don't
Jim's
think that
point,
they,
we can only afford to give them so much because we got to sell the high value stuff to get our return, a legitimate return
But
back.
that's the only way this becomes feasible. It sounds like 2 trains, 4 to 5. That's what makes this feasible. Am I missing something?
There is some upside, and to Crystal's, these assumptions, which they're assumptions on how much we can sell this for.
Yeah.
I believe Crystal has used conservative numbers.
extremely,
So I want to,
Raw and fortified.
yes.
raw, I'm not so sure, raw, I'm
Yeah.
not so sure. I think on the fortified side, I think there is upside potential
Yeah.
on the fortified material of selling it. I sort of discounted that in my mind because I think the logistics cost to do it, to get it there may be higher than what we projected here. But I'm okay with that from the standpoint that I think on the sales side, I think we have additional opportunity there.
Yeah, we increased operating costs by 40% going from raw to fortified.
Got it. I understand. But for what we are trying to decide, to the thought raw, however we play that out,
Mhm.
that's not a financially feasible proposition. It does not sound like to me.
If it was 100% sold raw, no.
Right.
And that would not be the intention, but I would expect that. And again, this comes down to when we start building this market. I would expect that we would be selling some portion of it
Sure.
raw in order to meet that market need.
Yeah, I get that.
Mhm.
So we are really talking about 2 trains and 4 to 5.
Best case scenario, yeah.
Which case?
That's the best, that if 100% fortified, 2 trains, 100% sold fortified,
Yeah, right, that's the best.
Millions,
But
yeah.
there's some mix, you're saying here.
that's
And
my
we don't
opinion.
know exactly yet what that mix might look like, because that was my original question. But we believe it's going to be, the higher value one is going to be fortified, of
Mhm.
course. And that's a plus $500,000 investment.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what we're talking, that's the bottom line.
Yep. The plus 500,000 is just to get that second train from the get-go. And then really kind of further building out this market plan for Cincinnati region will come and really kind of define in on, okay, 10% sold raw, 15% sold young fortified, compost mix, the rest fortified. And all that will also come down to, the whole composting piece and building that piece out.
I think from my perspective, and I'd like to try and bring this to a head here. I think it is something that is a great project. I think it's something that I think is very positive for Cincinnati parks to be involved with a project like this. My only drawback is committing $600,000 of our capital to that. Can we look for additional partners? I would even make a case that we should be talking with the city about this as an environmental move for the city to do that. I would think this is exactly the type of thing that we want to position in Cincinnati as being very positive from a green standpoint, as positive from a reclamation, and put us at the leading edge of a technology that is emerging. And also with the city's real emphasis on canopy and planting trees, all of this really fits in.
Mhm.
So because it's limited capital that we've been given, and this is from the city, and what the intent of that money from the city is to maintain our parks. I see this as a special project. So I love this concept. I love the opportunity. I think we should continue moving forward with it. I have a hard time today saying that I want to raise my hand and commit $600,000 of our limited capital that's supposed to maintain our parks to do this project. And the fact that we couldn't get Ohio DNR or others to say, yeah, we want to participate, it makes me a little nervous. I get that they want to be more on the other side of the composting end of using that compost material for something positive.
Mhm.
Maybe we can package it all together and I just, I'm struggling with the capital commitment up front for something that is very positive from a environmental standpoint. It's not something that's going to generate enough money for us to put it back into maintaining our parks. I mean, the best case scenario, Linda, is 2 trains, 100% fortified, being able to sell into a very hot market, and it's returning money above the 600,000 that we now have available to either reinvest into more environmental things or to maintain our parks that we have today.
And that's,
Go ahead, Linda.
that's the struggle that I have, because from an environmental science appeal standpoint, it is wonderful. And at the same time, we have to balance the financial stewardship of engaging in something that seems like it could be great and a great thing for the city.
Mhm.
Because I think it could be a great thing for the city, similar to what you're saying, Commissioner Gads. There ought to be other people who will be just as excited about this. And maybe it's taking the time to find out who those other people are, so we can share in the financial investment that's required to get into this. Because I think a lot of people will benefit. So I know that there's a grant that's attached to this, and there may be some timing on that.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it appropriate, or is it a possibility then that we could use that time to explore other partners, other people who get excited about this, just as excited as you obviously are, and see the value of it and the potential of it.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would want to do, because I'm just real hesitant when I think about the other things that are facing us in terms of where we need to spend money. How do we justify this, even though it has high potential and it's exciting, but it's a very practical choice that I'm thinking about right now, and looking for how can we get other partners to be excited about this and be willing to join with us from a financial standpoint to help make this a reality.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just the time and capacity commitment that takes to politic that through. You know, I've spent the past 3 months preparing for this moment.
Yeah.
And so just thinking through, you know, what it's going to take, and you all know the project, like thinking through what that's going to take, like bringing, 9 council members up to speed and politicking it through the city that way. Looking to other, park systems and having to have that MOU and that breakdown like we have with MSD and what's that return is just thinking about that piece of it. The $500,000 ask from the park board to invest in this was the relatively easy route, because just speaking to Craig, I know that the 752 has a large amount in it. It's not being utilized and been told to spend it down. So that's why I've come to this point. And so.
Crystal, a couple of questions. You said that roughly $400 a ton for raw biochar. Where are they getting it from now? If this would be, if we go forward with this, and this is a kind of, the only game in town for a region, where are they, those that are using it now, where's it coming from?
They're purchasing it from other production facilities in Illinois, Indiana, kind of around the country, and then shipping it in. And so a lot of the
So
cost
we would
is
have a freight advantage by producing it here.
100%.
I guess the other question is, $400 today, what is it, what's the price 3 years out or 2 years out? Or what the freight advantage is, you may be able to sell it for higher than that if, so I guess I'm just thinking about to your point about break even or doesn't break even, you always have the ability to raise your price if it
If the market's
justifies,
there.
if the market's there. So I don't know really what the market is like, or we would clearly have a competitive advantage from a freight perspective.
Absolutely. And just the product itself, looking nationally for what it's sold, it runs between $400 and $800 a ton raw. And so I used 500.
So,
I used
excuse
500 to
me,
keep it as conservative as possible.
Yes,
I'm inter-
Commissioner.
I'm interrupting again. Back up, you said which fund were you thinking this money would come from?
So-
It's a capital infrastructure fund that must be used for capital. So it is funds that are available for any capital expenditure.
And to my knowledge, I believe there's 2 million,
Around 2.3 million.
around 2.3 million in Fund 752. The $100,000 that was allocated previously came from Fund 428, which is the compensatory fund from urban forestry collected by trees that were removed throughout the right of way. So that didn't hit our bank account. That's just that the justification for that is that we would be using that right back into our tree plantings.
Do we know how much of that 2 million is earmarked already?
None of it. Craig, I'm speaking out of,
Yeah, no.
there's none of it.
Huh, okay.
So essentially coming forward with the project, knowing that we have a large account with a large sum of funds that, the commission has previously told us, put this in play. And so that's why I'm here. Here's an option.
The other thing I would say is, I noticed in the calculations, you're, kind of at some point anticipating 100% efficiency. And
Okay, and so we
not
cannot
gonna get
use
a
any,
100% efficiency. Go
we
ahead.
cannot use any of that $2 million for deferred maintenance.
Yes, we can.
Okay, there's the
Correct,
rub. There is the
Yes.
rub.
Yes, we can.
Because we've got $40 million in deferred maintenance. And, the old story, take care of what you have before you go for something new.
Okay, so where do we go? We have in front of us a request for $500,000 commitment above the $100,000 commitment. Crystal, what is the critical timeline? If we said today, let's look for a partner, what does that do to your timeline?
So the big piece that I've been holding off on is that operator agreement. So the operator agreement would include a contingency that says you have to produce this much per year in order for us to at least cover the cost of operations. Anything above that would be revenue with the potential to even share that revenue with the operator.
Yeah.
And so not knowing the production capacity of the machine, I cannot move forward on that RFP. I cannot move forward on identifying unless I'm going strictly for a one train show.
So, does anybody think a one train show is worth doing?
No.
I don't think it's an option. So I think, you run it for 2 trains or you don't do it at all.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing from you is that this is not a equipment purchase timeline critical point. You're saying your next thing is to negotiate and look for an operator.
The operator,
Not to
the
put in
salesperson.
a purchase order today for the equipment.
No, sir.
Okay, then I would recommend, I'm just gonna throw something out there. I recommend that we move forward with the planning for a 2-train facility. I think it's critical that we look for, because the last thing I would want to do today too is put in an order for $1.2 million of equipment and then find out we can't even find an operator or an operator that we can come to an agreement with to actually run this. Because what we haven't talked about here today is that we are looking to hire someone to run this entire operation. Obviously, we would augment it hopefully with our maintenance people, and there's got to be coordination from parks, but we are looking to outsource this whole operation from a production standpoint. So I would, in my mind, I would, number one, say, let's focus on a 2-train. Let's look for partners, but I think it's critical, and it will also show us that we've got somebody that's there, so we don't buy a boat dock that we don't know how to run. So if we start the process today of identifying who would be our manager of this product, I think we can move forward, and then in the meantime, look for partners for where we can come up with a shared investment in this. And it may be, you're already in negotiations with MSD. I'll just throw out there in public comments, perhaps rather than giving us the 200,000 in return for 400 tons of material, maybe they give us the $200,000 as an investment in the project, and then we give them 50, or we give them a reduced rate on whatever, or an increased rate to, you know where I'm going with that.
Right.
But look for opportunities then to how we find partners for the 400,000, and including the city, because we are trying to impress upon the city the $400 million of backlog that we have on our critical maintenance. I'm concerned that we are taking a special project that is an extraordinary special project and using some of our funding for that.
Question, how much did the city give to the pickleball court?
$500,000.
There you have it.
Okay, well, I think that's perspective, again, out to the public comment. You know, if they can scrape up $500,000 for pickleball, this is a citywide endeavor that will, I don't know, what's a life expectancy? Is this a 10, 15 year? I mean, the box isn't going to go away. There's guts inside that will have to be replaced. So I don't know what the, you know, life and the cost to replace it would be, but you know, the impact that it has across the region, as well as the potential to actually earn you know, some money, I think is a pretty compelling argument. The question I have is, are there any drop dead dates from the grant from the Bloomberg? They say you've got to get this into you know, service by such and such a time, or you've got to commit to something, otherwise, you know, you're kicked off the list.
The grant agreement hasn't come to the city yet. We put forward our budget. Bloomberg is going through it, writing up the grant agreement. It should hit we expected at the beginning of April. It's still working through, I guess, their team and reviews.
But if we don't come to some decision at some point in time, I guess I'm assuming they're going to, you know, look elsewhere for participants.
I mean, if we didn't sign off on the grant agreement, ideally, what my ideal situation is that we are producing by June of next year, that we have an operator in place by June of this year. That person is brought on to help through the site planning, building the local market, acquiring the production facility, being right there alongside through that whole process before we even get into the operation.
And what is that trigger date for, when do you have to place this order to be in your timeline where that equipment is there running?
I would be doing it September. That's my goal.
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing, go ahead.
I would just suggest that potentially we could work with Crystal kind of off.
That would be amazing.
Public time and help craft, or at least peruse, run it through the ringer, so to speak.
Absolutely. I welcome that. Again, public servant. this is a business person's ordeal. I'm doing the best I can, but I would welcome as much insight and help seeing this through.
Okay. I think that's the direction we're gonna go.
Okay.
If there's no disagreement, we want to continue moving forward, but we want to help you identify some of these strategic issues that we've got.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal, this is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you so
My pleasure.
Hey, Mr. Director.
I can be somewhat speedier on the next piece. There is a stairway in Oakley. The city has moved away from having interdepartmental MOUs, but prior to that motion, this process was started. There's a stairway in Oakley from the Kimball Rec Center. The repair and replacement of that extends onto park property. We have an MOU for consideration to enter into to allow the proceeding with that work, which is substantially under control of Rec Commission, but some of it's our dirt, so we need to execute an MOU for that to go forward.
For background information as well, Oakley Recreation Commission is in the process of designing and building a whole new rec center for Oakley. And this stairway goes right next to it. I did verify that the stairway will not be going through the planned new rec center. So I am fully supportive of this.
Yes.
Are there any other questions regarding?
I think we do need a vote.
We do, yeah, absolutely. Did you draft a resolution, or what do they need from us?
Approval for.
I move that we approve the request for an MOU and an MOU agreement left to the director to negotiate for stairway replacement in Oakley. Is there a second? There's a second. Tia, can we have a roll call, please?
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Nair.
We have grant application acceptance. Craig, can you speak to those?
Yes.
Good morning, commissioners.
Where are we on that?
It's the grant application from the Sports Foundation.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, pickleball. This grant application is for the Sawyer Point speaker installation at the tennis court. Staff requests the board approve the application and acceptance of grant funds made from the Society Parks Foundation in the amount of $9,810.
And this 9,000 was raised by the pickleball community, is that correct?
That is correct. It's actually one individual donated the money for the installation.
Any questions, comments? Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call?
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the foundation for working with, I know the foundation continues to work with the donors who continue to raise money for the pickleball center. So it's a great partnership there. Director.
We have next some updates. Deputy Director Mobley has updates on Owl's Nest and Biochar. 1, 2.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Owl's Nest. And as you know, in December, during the board meeting, you approved to release an RFP for schematic design to allow us to have sorry, that was my phone. To allow us to have options or a menu, if you will, to not only stabilize the building, but also see what further use could be. And you also approved the reappropriation of $300,000 that was originally allocated for the demolition. We are excited that there is an award recommendation that is right now at the city manager's office for approval. This is again for a schematic design portion of this RFP. The cost of this design will be $21,910. What this will do, not only show how it can be stabilized, provide different menu options to see what you would prefer to review, as well as engage the community in seeing what their preference would be for this pavilion. So this is just the beginning steps. So we had $300,000 that was reappropriated after the payment of the services that Gregory Springs provided for the beginning of the demolition, if you will. That was $12,500 approximately. And after this $21,900, you will have a balance of $265,500 to go towards this.
Jenny, what's the timeline on awarding that contract?
So the award, like I said, is down at the city manager's office right now to get approved. We're hoping to have a signature by the end of the week. I believe they're meeting today, but I could be wrong. I know they meet on Thursdays. After that, we will need to certify funds, the $21,000, in order to enter into that contract. Once that contract is entered into, I'm hoping by mid-May, we would be able to enter into that contract. They would like 2 months to get those schematic designs ready to go for review. So we are looking at the end of July, beginning of August for a review package.
Okay. We approved this in December.
We did.
So for a $21,000 contract, we're looking at 5 to 6 months. Joel, if you'll make a note of that.
Yes, and I do have to say that staff was certainly very diligent about this. Unfortunately, it is a 15-step process that we have to go through in order to just get the RFP out.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
There is a 15-step. Yes.
Okay, just so everybody.
There is a 15-step process in order to, that has to go through numerous approvals. And because the whole RFP was over $50,000, and it also has to go through city manager approval.
Well, can you help us with that?
Sure.
What is over $50,000 if it's a $21,000 contract?
So the RFP went out for schematic designs, the possibility or future possibilities, I will say, for construction development or drawings, construction drawings. I'm new to the planning room.
Yeah.
And so there are different aspects of that. The other parts of this RFP may not be implemented or will be implemented once those choices are chosen, after the menu of options are chosen and reviewed. So the entire contract or the entire RFP was over $50,000. However, this portion that we are moving forward with right now is just the $21,000 portion of the RFP.
So it's because the potential was greater than 50,000 is the reason why we have to go through 15 steps.
Not necessarily. The 15 steps always has to go, it has to go through this full 15 steps anyway for
Regardless of how much the contract is.
That is correct. If we are putting out an RFP or a mini RFP, there are these steps that we need to follow in order to get that RFP out. However, it does require city manager's approval if it is over $50,000.
That's the only additional.
That's correct.
That's the 16th step. That's the 16th step, okay.
Okay.
Yes, which is included in one step in my layout.
Can we just make sure?
Sure.
It's December to middle of May is when we're projected, right? Is that
To enter into a contract, yes.
Okay, just wanted to be clear.
And then potentially end of July or early August to have the finished product.
Yes, they have entered or requested the 2 months in order to get those proposals or the schematic designs prepared and ready.
Any other questions? No action is required. Hopefully you sense the
I do.
the board's frustration.
I do sense that.
Welcome
And
to the public sector.
Sure.
Does the 2 months include community engagement or just the schematic design for stabilization?
It is just the schematic design in order to understand how to stabilize it as well as provide different options to move further into community engagements later. What it will be is a different set of designs with cost estimates to know not only what the community would like to see within this and also what the dollar amounts would be if we would say use put restrooms in there or a stage portion. So what it will do is provide the different options with those cost estimates, and that will help determine how much more money we would need in order to move forward with those options.
So just to be clear on that, community engagement will follow this effort.
That's correct. This is just getting us
And
there.
so this effort is really to kind of create a menu of opportunities for the community to opine on.
Correct.
I'm just wondering if there is an interim step to at least have community engagement up front to direct what those menus are, to eliminate maybe some choices and maybe have a follow-up, or it seems to me that there's this, we're going to take a swing at what we think potentially the community wants. Community come back and says, I don't like any of it. Then we got to go back another 16 steps or whatever, or maybe it's not maybe you don't have to do that. I don't know how the system works, but to maybe touch base with the community kind of on the onset of this to at least start to narrow or at least get a sense of what they're looking for and maybe better define the work that the architectural firm or engineering firm, whoever it is, would do.
And if you would make a note that the commissioners are asking.
Listen to you there.
We would strongly recommend that once the contractor is identified, that we move forward with the concept of touching base with Owl's Nest CPAC group prior to issuance and development of the design plant.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, next one, Jenny.
So as you know, also in December, there was the award recommendation provided for the boat dock. And since then, this is unfortunately has been moving a little bit slower. I know not only for the vendor, but for us as well. And I just wanted to provide an update of where we are. We are working with the law department in order to get a final contract awarded or signed off on with the vendor, Hafner and Sons. And this contract has its oddities, I will say, and trying to, it's not something that is normally a template. One, it is on water. Two, there are bringing, a facility to us, but also purchasing new equipment and other facilities that would attach to that. So it is a little comprehensive, but what we have done is we have worked with the law department for one. They have been provided all the RFP. They have sent over some questionnaires. I've provided a term sheet for them. We have reviewed the questionnaire, the document to answer all the questions that they have. And it certainly appears that it is a little bit of a struggle of who the facility would belong to, what parts of the facility, and how that will work. So I do recognize that this has been a much slower process than we would prefer. And I am hoping that I can move this forward much faster and get at least a final draft in order to really start the main negotiations. In the meantime, however, I will say that we have had meetings with Hafner's and conversations with Hafner just to understand the exact placement of what their thoughts were, the boat docks, taking a look at the site to work through some of those, not only questions, but implementation for operation. And Hafner has been very proactive on their half on trying to make sure that they are not the cause of any delay, I will say. And as you see on your sheet, there are many things that they have been working on. For example, they have retained a civil and environmental consultants. They have worked with multiple agencies such as MSD, Coast Guard, EPA, in order to make sure that they are not only, I lost my thought there, but not only complying with regulations, but also being prepared for those regulations in the future. Also, they have been in discussions with the Cincinnati Police Department, Fire Department, Hamilton County Sheriffs in order to gather their input for either a better design and help them out with facilities that are there. There is a whole list here that they have been certainly working on, and I know that they are very anxious to get started officially once the contract is signed and approved.
Who is your point person in law that's handling this project?
It is Jennifer McKenzie.
Once the contract is signed,
Yes.
what does the clock look like going forward?
I can say it is a little tentative at this moment as well, just because hopefully once that contract is signed, I'm hoping at the very latest June, even though I would like it in May. Once that is signed, then they can certainly start moving forward in procuring more of the items that are needed and really designing this out. So then I can present those designs to you, or Hafner can present those designs to you. So I know there was a desire to make sure that a lot of the fixtures and everything were up to the park board standards. So timeline, I have spoken to Hafner about that, and we do feel that there can be some components of this that will be implemented during the summer or early fall. However, opening this boat dock at the either fall or end of fall, really during that slow season, probably does not make most sense. So what we are looking at is a grand opening of spring of 2023.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm feeling a little duped. When we awarded this project to Hafner, I guess in what they presented, I assumed that a lot of these things had been answered. A lot of these points that I'm staring at on this piece of paper have been answered. And now we're finding out that they're just now delving into it, and they're now looking for grant monies.
They are trying to partner to look for different grant monies. I feel that the proposal was just that, to say that that's what they were proposing to bring to the table. And obviously the ask of the 1.7 million was part of that RFP. I think that the proposal was an intent to move forward with these. However, the legalities of that technically should not begin until that contract is signed.
Does anybody else feel duped?
No.
Or
Quite honestly, here's my.
You feel fine? You feel fine with what's being presented to us right now?
My perspective is I'm amazed that Hafner has continued going through as much as they have, all the way to acquiring pedestrian ramps and everything before we have even come to an agreement or presented to them a proposed contract. In my mind, I feel like, and when I read through this, none of this were things that I thought needed to be done up front. So for example, the grant money, just they've committed to doing it. Now that if they're going out looking for grant money that can help supplement their own out-of-pocket money, I don't have a problem with that personally. I'm more concerned that, again, we approved this in December. And we now are looking at hopefully June or July before we ever present to Hefner a proposed contract. So I guess that's just my perspective.
Excuse me, but Hafner has not presented to us anything to approve in design besides that little sketch that they had when they first came to our attention.
Right. We haven't given them a contract yet. So in my
Don't give them a
opinion,
contract without knowing what you're getting.
we already approved that. We approved from the presentations that were made to us. We approved awarding them a contract based on what they presented to us. Now it's up to us to present them with that contract. Just my
Question for you, Jenny. Once the contract is finalized, approved, and so on,
Yes.
Hafner will come to us and say, this is our final suggestion as designed. We'll have some opportunity to feedback and tweak and so on and so forth. And is it clear sailing from there, or does the city get to come back in and approve or not approve anything, or is the city in our rearview mirror at that point in time?
We will be working with them, especially our planning and design team will be working with them to oversee what is happening. in
Making
either
sure that it's
construction.
done according to
Correct.
code and all of that stuff, I guess.
Yes, and then also when it comes to operations, working out the really fine details
Sure.
of that and.
But from their opportunity to say, oh, wait, we gotta approve this or check this out after the fact, and it might be 7 steps that they have to go through instead of whatever, that's not on the table.
No, what I would plan to do is, once they have a solid concept design or a solid design, I would like them to then present that to you so that you have time to review that and make some tweaks before that moves forward. And then once.
And it's off to the races.
Then it's off to the races.
Okay.
That's correct.
It will be subject to regular construction guidelines.
No, yeah, right. Yeah, the other caveat I wanted to extend is by the nature of this existing at the intersection of several jurisdictions, Coast Guard, with the water. That by its very nature does inject additional complexity, and complexity can equal time. If I had a vision of what that was, we talked about that was, don't know what that, and maybe it's not there, but just wanna express that caution that additional oversight can lead to additional time. Sorry.
And so I hear that everything could be in order, but doing this in the fall wouldn't make sense. And maybe that allows for the kinds of things that you're talking about, those last minute checks. In terms of the design, we did approve the design as presented. But at that time, there were some suggestions. I mainly remember some aesthetic presentation, because it's going to be in our front door.
Correct.
And it's important for us to have a look at what that last thing looks like. And I think we left the door open for that. So Commissioner Castellini, I think in my mind anyway, when I hear additional design, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, or I'm hearing as their request. And the other piece is if they can go out and get additional grant money, wonderful. But what we have committed to is the dollar amount that we agreed to when we signed off on this.
Correct.
Okay.
Understood. It's certainly, yes, what they brought to you was a concept, and what my expectation when I say they're, bringing designs to you is to kind of show you what that final detail would be. So the concept is not changing, but the finishes, yes,
maybe.
of what that would look like, and you would be able to review more.
Great.
Super. Any other questions?
2023.
That's what I'm shooting for, yes.
That's what I.
Yes, that's what it is, spring 2023.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Great, thank you.
I would like to Hang on, Lou, I would like to change the order here. Kathy is sitting here as a third party. Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Okay. We'll pursue. We'll continue that with,
Outstanding. We wanted to hear from, Liz Ann is the regional manager of Riverfront and Special Events and throws a heck of a party, actually a heck of a lot of parties, heck of parties. So we asked Lou to come and give you an overview of, we just do an extensive programming and engagement, and he can speak to it a lot better than I can, so I'm gonna shut up.
Well, I'm hoping to inject a ray of sunshine into this cloudy day. Lots of good
you're
news.
standing in a park. What more would you want?
You're absolutely correct. Before I get into the meat of the program, I'd first like to bring up several overriding themes that we have in our event team to make this program happen. One, we've established this culture of yes, because quite simply, sometimes that's all it takes is to get a partner and say yes to some stuff that they want to do. Also establishing an attitude of making things happen. Sometimes we change the wording on making things happen, but that's our tagline down there. And we also try to establish a whole Cincinnati Parks approach. You've heard in terms of foreign policy, a whole government approach. Well, this program really is a whole of parks approach where finance, CEV with marketing, and the regional operations staffs all get engaged, and then of course our partners. And frankly, I was remiss because several of our key partners are actually here with us in the room. I'd like to introduce them. Emmeline is from Clifton Cultural Arts Center. We have Priscilla Elgersma, who's the president of Stanberry Park Advisory Council. We have Mary Jo Baisley, who's been around forever. Right? Rapid Run.
Yes.
And Kathy Wade, who's taken a big step in helping us activate Eden Park this year, and we'll describe that in a little bit more detail. So now we'll get into the meat of the presentation. Again, today we'll be discussing the Partnership and Community Events Program. Uh-oh. I've already had mission failure here.
Let's try it again. Okay, I'll run it for you.
What's that?
I'll run it for you.
Oh,
She'll
well.
on the slides, you can speak to her, she'll be the clicker.
Okay, so again, we want to first talk a little bit about the why. Why are we, implementing a program like this? So why do we need to engage the community? Next slide. Why do we need to engage the community? Parks belong to the community. We are only the stewards and caretakers on the community's behalf. People do not value what they do not know. Parks are not an abstract concept, they have tangible value to the community. Involvement equals ownership. Being involved with parks creates the sense of ownership. Next. Parks are for everybody, regardless of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, and culture. Citizens do not necessarily know this unless we tell them. Next slide, please. So partnership programs. Can we go back a little bit? See, I knew I'd be bamboozled by putting too much animation into this. I didn't. So partnership programs, engaging communities through partnership. Next slide. Let's take a graphic look of what the program looks like. Here's a map of Cincinnati. While the program existed prior to 2018, I used that as my initial reference point. So in 2018, this is what the program basically looked at. Another key reference point is the circles reflect a 1 mile radius, which would generally be considered a reasonable walking distance from our program and event locations. So that's how it looked in 2018. 2019, we added several parks. 2021, of course, 2020 was the apocalypse, so nothing happened. So 2021, we added some more parks, and 22, some more parks. I want to throw in the nature centers there too for a point of graphic reference, because of course we have programming going on at our nature centers as well that activates our parks. So if you throw those, that's the next slide. So as you can see, we've covered the area of Cincinnati in pretty great detail. Next slide. So anyway, what we've done is we've created a bold vision of equity, having programs within a walking distance, basically, of every Cincinnati resident. Here's some additional goals for the program. Again, build strong community-based partnerships. Those are primarily our advisory councils, but include also community councils, business associations, urban redevelopment corporations, and other entities. We want to support Cincinnati Parks' overall mission. We all are very familiar from Mr. Carton's basic principles, and this program nests into those principles of clean, safe, reliable, green, beautiful, and enriching. Next bullet. We, of course, want to enhance our brand and image. Next bullet. And most importantly, we want to improve the neighborhoods and improve the quality of life for our citizens. Next slide. This is just a simple mission statement for the program. Basically, in partnership with community-based organizations, we provide family-friendly program in our parks. What can you think of a better task to go into? And again, enjoyment, enlightenment, and enrichment. Those are the kind of the pillars of the program. Some program elements. This is what we do from the park standpoint with our partners to actually execute this program. Again, we've already discussed, it's partnership based. Next bullet. Seed money through the form of the AMP and Growth Spec funds can provide funding to execute these events, primarily for the music portion of these programs. Event production support, either a lot of times it's me, or it can be some of my staff that actually go out there and help them plan, coordinate, and execute their events. Next bullet. Staff support. This can be either from my staff down at the riverfront or from the regions as well. So we're talking servicing of the restrooms during, for example, during the event, or trash pickup, or things of that nature. Next bullet. Sometimes all we're doing is letting our partner organization use the venue, right? So it can be quite that simple. Next bullet. And additional support capabilities. What I mean by that is basically we have a stockage of games, tents, limited supply of tents, tables, things of that nature that we can bring to the party, so to speak, to get these programs executed. So next slide. So now let's look at some of the individual parks and what we're doing there. Stanberry Park for 2022. Our community partners are the Stanberry Park Advisory Council and the Mount Washington Community Council. This is basically their 5th year of doing programming in the park. This year we're going to do Friday night funs. Next bullet. Movie nights and a Shakespeare in the Park. On the 28th of May, there'll be a family day with Madcap and Zach Morgan. Next bullet. And the infamous Pumpkin Chuck in November. Here's some really nice pictures. There's the trebuchet used at the Pumpkin Chuck, and basically the brand new Kyle Plush Pavilion. Because we have, we started implementing programming in an aggressive manner at Stanberry, was the impetus for Priscilla and her group to push to have that pavilion put in place. So this can have a synergistic effect. Next slide, please. Kennedy Heights, they have the Play in the Park program. Let's look at the community partners. I'll let you go ahead and read them real quick. Next bullet. This is the 8th year. This is actually one program that preceded me. But Play in the Park every Wednesday, June through mid-August. And this is just a wonderful program. And it really originated to change the complexion of Kennedy Heights, because in that 2013, 2014, the reputation of the parks had really suffered. There was some criminal activity in the park, some less than desirable activity. And the community came together with parks and the police and really, did tangible things to change the perceptions of that park. So that, and it continues to this very day. So it's a very exciting program. They do add music twice a month, and then they do a real big event in July. Next slide. Here's a nice picture of their activities. Again, as everything always is, family friendly. Open view for 2022. Next bullet. There's our community partners. We're going to be doing some concerts. And then we also have in the park after dark, movie nights. And finally, there'll be a Kids Fest in 3 July, which will feature face painting, a petting zoo, and Zach Morgan, who's a very wonderful children's entertainer. There we go. And there's also an aggressive schedule of yoga in the park. You'll notice I like to use the word aggressive. So anyway, here's some pictures of last year's Kids Fest. Kids having fun, getting their face painted. So very nice. Rapid Run. Ta-da. Ta-da. Some community partners. Actually, it's been going on much longer than 4 years. So on the 24th of June, we have a big combination of activities: canoe, music, and a movie night. 29 July, Zach Morgan and canoes, a music and craft day in August. And in September, we have madcap puppets and some games. So some really nice activities for Rapid Run. Some beautiful pictures. There you go. There's Mary Jo. So anyway, just some wonderful, wonderful programming. Mount Echo, we take a slightly different approach. You can see we have a robust amount of partners. It's their 3rd year. The primary event in Mount Echo West is Riverfest West, which capitalized on the fireworks from downtown. We have an event up there on the hill where it culminates in being able to view the fireworks down on the river. Family focused all day event, has food trucks, music, and games. Really nice. We also have a very aggressive slate of yoga in the park as well in Mount Echo for this year. Next slide. Old Park, very well established advisory council. And they do a slate of 4 music festivals, one of which we help fund through AMP. They do 4 tasting events. And they have a major 4th of July celebration as well. We help them with quite a bit. For Pyatt, we have the acoustic lunch series. Our partners are 3CDC and the Cincinnati Police Department. They're Wednesdays, June through August, during the lunch hour from 11:30 to 1:30. Well, you're going to get too quick on me, Tia. I know I have to hurry, but give us. Get me through this. Okay. Let's go. We can now go to so CALMS or ALMS is you see the community partners. They're going to be doing 2 events, at least planned so far. We're talking about a 3rd. On 5/20, they'll do a Mayfest celebration. And then at the end of September, a bluegrass and barbecue. Both events will feature music, food truck, and children's activities. Food trucks, plural. Here's some pictures of last year's event that went very,
Is that
very
guy in
nice.
the top left corner doing aggressive yoga?
Well, yeah.
Very
Passive yoga.
Passive, that's passive, Joe. Okay, so Mount Airy, here's some of our community partners. First item I'd like to highlight is that Trail Fest. That's gonna be an all-day activity, and it's got like 40 organizations involved. And the Cincinnati Hiking Club has been the driving force behind that, but it's gonna be a really wonderful event, very exciting. Silent Disco, we have to do that again. We have not yet determined a date yet. This is another thing, very excited about, and we're gonna talk about a few more, but we're gonna have the full Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra out at Maple Ridge Lodge performing, which is, as you can imagine, a huge logistical endeavor. And then last item for Mount Airy, at least planned so far, is the Hallow West event. This is something we tried last year. It's at Oak Ridge Lodge. It's a family-friendly Halloween-themed event. Let's look at some pictures of last year's Hallow West event. Kids having fun, painting pumpkins. We had a costume contest. I was the judge, got myself in a pickle. Face painting there. Okay, moving on to Westwood Town Hall. Our community partners, we partner with Westwood Works on the second Saturday events, June through August. Very nice community festival, which used to be in the street, but they're now in the park. And on 5/5, there'll be a Dora grand opening event there at the town hall as well, which will feature music. Next slide, please. Bellevue, this is a recent addition. They did in their first year last year. They do a lot of community cleanup events that are followed by community picnics, which are really super nice events. And then we also, they're gonna do a Friday in the Park monthly music series, May through September. Actually, they're doing one in April. It's this Friday, their first one. And it will also have some food trucks. That is very interesting. You don't have to do anything with the slide, but on Bellevue, that Monogold Studios provides the musical acts for free. And so these are kind of emerging bands that are just looking for the opportunity to play. So I think that's a pretty interesting perspective. Now moving on to Inwood, start out with our community partners. They'll have a community picnic this year, yoga in the park activities. A very exciting addition to Inwood this year, thanks to CCAC. There'll be a summer jazz series, 11 events there in Inwood through the summer. And then working with Carol on a big 3rd of July event. That'll include fireworks, food trucks, music, and games. Next slide. Mount Storm, another fairly recent addition. They're having a Memorial Day parade and community picnic, obviously on Memorial Day. So that'll be very nice. And they're also going to do a Shakespeare in the Park event with a date that is yet to be determined. Next slide. Laurel Park. Before I get into Laurel, I want to, at last year's presentation, and I believe it was Commissioner Noor mentioned, what are you doing? Have you analyzed, is there enough going on in underserved communities? And we really need to look at that and make sure we're doing enough. So that's exactly what I did. So we, did some analysis of where we had our programs at. And as I stated in that meeting, part of the problem was we hadn't had anybody reach out to us partner-wise. So again, we redoubled our efforts, and it started with a conversation with the foundation, to where we could get the funding, because we were, really wanting to jump into this hard. So these next 3 parks that I'm going to discuss, I've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to the foundation. So let's look at Laurel. Community partners, Seven Hills. I started with Tia, right, last year and this year until she came on board. And then the West End Community Council. We have family fun days planned March through September. So we've already had 2, 3 of which will be enhanced with music through the heart of the summer, June, July, and August. They all feature games and food trucks. On 7/16, another full CSO performance. Very, very excited about that. And then we'll have, culminate the season with S-Fest. Again, linked in very tightly to the foundation. Next slide. Oh, there I mentioned them. I can't mention them frankly enough particularly with these 3 parts. Here's some pickup. Can you go back to that, will it? I think it's supposed to pan through that, and that's the last slide. The animation got screwed up. There are actually more pictures of S-Fest, but we'll have to just use this one. Excuse me, next slide, please. MLK, I'm also very excited with this. Mrs. Thomas helped us out quite a bit, establishing the connections with the community groups, which I certainly appreciate. So we're well underway. Again, I need to mention foundation support. There are 3 family days planned. All will feature the items listed there. Excuse me. To give you some further insight on those family days, one is linked in with Juneteenth, and then the August one is kind of linked into Black Family Reunion in Avondale. And that coincides with the one that's happening here in Sawyer Point. Next slide. Thank you. Talking too much. It's that aggressive talking and all the pressure I got to get this thing done. Thank you, Jenny. Okay, Owl's Nest, our community partners. Again, need to mention foundation support. There'll be a national night out, which is kind of a national thing that establishes better police-community relationships. That's on the first Tuesday of August. 8/6, there's our 3rd full CSO performance there at Owl's Nest. We have complimentary activities to go along with it. And then we have 2 family fun days, which will have bands, games, face painting, and food trucks. Next slide. Eden Park. The first, and I'm very excited about this, the Books Alive event that Kathy's working with us on. It will feature activities at book reading and musical performances at Season Good, Mirror Lake, and Crow Conservatory. And there are also portions of the event that'll happen at the Cincinnati Ballet, the Stowe House. And am I forgetting anything, Kathy?
Art Museum, Artworks, Futures Work, on the Hills Library, and Wanda Smith.
So it's a really big deal, and it'll be very, very nice. It focuses on being a cell phone free day, right? Leave your cell phones at home. And it encourages, walking through the stations of the event. So it's unique, and it's really, really cool. Also, Kathy's going to bring crown jewels of jazz to Season Good from her previous location. So we're very excited about that. And then, of course, we also have, it's commonly jazz in August. So we're going to have a full summer of jazz in Season Good, right? So we're, again, very excited about that. Next slide. Burnet Woods, lots of partners at Burnet Woods. Again, our friends at CCAC, we're working with them for the Wednesday in the Woods, which is just a wonderful series. Next bullet, Springfest is actually this weekend. So, and that was also a very neat thing that that is basically being put together by a UC student group. They did soup to nuts on it. Basically, all I said, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's run with it. And they ran with it. So again, very, very exciting. And then will be next bullet. yoga and forest meditation activities, and those are a year-round thing. And in the summer months, they use the bandstand or the Millionaires Club. And then in the winter, they actually use the Nature Center. Here's some great pictures of Wednesday in the Woods. Next slide. Next slide. This here is baby Oliver and his opa at his first Wednesday in the Woods. I had to throw that in there. That's horrible, shameless. Okay, in this next two last slides, so I'm moving right along. Again, I can't say enough about the mutual support and coordination that my team and the Cincinnati Park Foundation engage in. They're helping us out with a number of things. Again, mutual support for Smale Family Fun, which is at the Schmid Lap event lawn at Smale. We've already discussed in detail the Family Fun Days. They've become a full partnership in another big project I'm doing at Sawyer Point, or have been doing, which is the summer concert series, which we've upgraded quite a bit this year. And then, of course, they're also doing the Loop 5 Adventure Program, which won a big award this year in multiple parks, and the Be Well program again in multiple parks. So again, I can't say enough about our relationship with the foundation. So I think the next slide is questions. Oh, no, I need to leave you with another visual. So we revisit this map that shows kind of our coverage within a walking distance. And if you advance the slide, one more click. This is what it looks like if you just expand that radius out to 1.5 miles. So you can see we've got a really solid saturation here. Now we're on questions.
The CSO, 3 full complements of the CSO. Who's funding that?
I didn't ask, I just said yes.
It's the Brady Foundation.
The Brady Foundation, okay, wow,
Yeah.
great for that, that's awesome.
It's very exciting.
Certainly. I think all of this is exciting. And Commissioner Slinger always says, to our 12 people who are watching.
We're up to 13 now.
I hope there are more, because I think this is information people don't have. Maybe in your own neighborhood, you might know what's going on, but the fact that in any given week, there's some really good activity happening in the park somewhere. And I think that is great for people to know. And we certainly appreciate all the partnerships that make this happen, because we couldn't do it without them.
That's right.
It's excellent. And I'm excited about the new ones that are coming on board. The one thing that I would offer as an add, and it goes back to one of your early slides where you talked about parks are for everyone. And you listed a whole lot of people. The one that I would add there is physically challenged, because that is one we pay particular attention to. And we're really excited about the new assets that we're putting in place to make the parks more accessible to everyone. So I just want to highlight that one.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for all
Thank
this
you.
work.
Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It is amazing.
Yeah.
And again, to echo Commissioner Thomas, all the people here today that are part of this whole program, it's a great effort through the community. So appreciate all the volunteer time, the organization, CCAC, and all the others that are participating. Thanks for partnering with us.
There could be no better segue in speaking of partnership and engaging parks through partnership than to introduce former Commissioner Kathy Crane to share with us some information about Parks RX.
Thank you, John, and thank you, commissioners, for letting me come take some time today to talk, and I'll be somewhat quick. It's an interesting opportunity that deals with business, branding, and health opportunities between the Cincinnati Parks and UCMC, their Integrated Center for Health and Wellness. So it's pretty exciting. I would like to say right off the top, and I will say this again, and Tia, you'll have to be my partner here. I am asking for a partnership. UC and the Integrative Center has already given their approval for a partnership with the parks, but I am not asking, as John knows and made perfectly clear, I am not asking for any money. I am not asking for a binding agreement and no legal contract. So
How refreshing.
just want to say there are not.
We may be able to get through that one.
Exactly, that there are not 15 steps here. There are not 15 steps. I am going to read this because when I deal with a hospital system or with parks, I like to be precise and the words count, particularly since we're in a public meeting. So this program would be called, partnership would be called Parks for Wellness. And we can go right here. I have included 2 brief slides. This is just to show you what the vision and the mission is of the integrative health system at UCMC. And the next slide here. And this shows how broadly foundational this integrative medicine is at the hospital. It covers every specialty, every business line, family planning, family primary care is what I mean to say, and also the medical education. So the medical school is involved with this. So it's very integral to the health services within the hospital. And one quick note, we have just, I say we, I'm on the advisory board of the integrative medicine area. We have just been designated as an OSHA integrative center. There are only 7 other major hospitals, academic hospitals that have been given this recognition. So as of May 1st, we will then be called the OSHA Center. So very exciting. Next slide, please. So integrative medicine, just quickly before we go on to the model, is evidence-based and it's complementary to Western medicine. We know this. So for instance, an oncologist may suggest acupuncture for one of his or her patients who's going through chemotherapy. Primary care may suggest exercise and dietary changes. So these are a complement to what the doctor is already prescribing. It's very exciting. And now with new research over the past 10 years and capabilities of MRIs, fMRIs, scanning, all of the testing that's done, we now know that time in nature is also an evidence-based therapy. So it is slowly becoming into our norm of medical care. So what would a wellness model look like? Well, we have something in general up here. If a patient is at their doctor's office for whatever reason, the physician says, I think that walking in the park, I think yoga in the park, I think getting outside in the park, time in nature, would be helpful to curing or making you better or keeping you in good health. That physician would then do an actual prescription, and that prescription would go into the health record system. So that would be with the history of the patient forever. The patient follows the prescription, we hope, and incorporates nature into their lifestyle with beneficial health outcomes. And interestingly, because adherence is one of the #1 issues of any health system, those who enter into a prescription with nature actually adhere better to a prescription than, for instance, any of us taking our antibiotics to the very last pill. So it's very exciting to see that this could really change lives. This model, just so you know, is not new. There are 2 very well-established programs, one called Parks RX, that was created for doctors and doctors' offices, and also the Canadian model, which just took effect last year across the whole country. Every physician in the Canadian health system can now prescribe time in nature at all of the Canadian national parks. So this is very exciting, mainly for the data that we will now have. And of course, here we'll be using the data as well, since it's in the patient's records. Well, let's go to the next one, dear. This one I wanted to bring to the attention of the commissioners because we have serious health issues in this city, serious health issues. This is just one chronic disease, and this is obesity. Right now, 68% of our Cincinnati adults are overweight or obese. I have to tell you that obesity leads to diabetes, heart disease, depression, you name it, it leads to it. So being able to offer, particularly our low-income residents, and thank you for, where's the gentleman that, thank you for showing us that wonderful schematic of how parks are in every neighborhood and so close. So offering them a low barrier, there is no barrier to coming to the parks, a safe, we know that the parks are safe, green, wonderful, and convenient treatment option very well could change these dynamics. And trust me, every chronic disease, I could show a chart for every chronic disease in the city of Cincinnati. We are not a healthy community here. All of those could change by this program. Am I, is that an exaggeration? No, I don't believe so. I think this is an opportunity that all the hospital systems, ultimately, I would hope all the hospital systems use this model and come to the Cincinnati parks to say, our patients need time in nature, and this is the perfect place for it. So as I said, I think you can go, I think there's one more. Yeah, thank you. This is an idea of what a partnership model is. You'll notice that, of course, from the hospital's perspective, we need coordinators that's talking to the patient, say, which park are you going to? Here are the activities. Does that cost money? Yes, it does. I'll get to that in just a moment. And we certainly need help from the parks, from their staff in providing data and materials to the physician to educate our patients. It does say in here, and the supports parks for wellness coordinator position. We can stop right there. I have said up front to you, I am not asking for money. I am not asking for money. Several of us at the center are willing to go fundraise for this opportunity. What we will need, of course, ultimately is staff time to get the two staffs together to make sure that this program is finely tuned and really an opportunity for both organizations to use community health as a brand. I think it's incredibly important. Everything I do is both business and branding. Yeah, I can't help myself. I'm always looking at both. So that is where we stand. I know that I'm last and it's almost lunchtime, but so I would ask for your support. As I say, there is no legal contract here. No fine points, no details that you have to read. But what the partnership in name allows us to do is actually fundraise in a much easier sense, and also to do grant writing. And hopefully we'll be able to use some of the staff for that, as well as the integrative medicine area, to go out and fund this program, do a pilot program. We might do a pilot program with an already ongoing educational group that works with type 2 diabetes. The doctor may prescribe this group a 45-minute walk at Smale Park or a 45-minute walk at Mount Echo, but it will be part of the health system. So yeah, so I think I got that all done faster than I ever thought. So I'm sure there are questions, but
Comments, I just totally think this is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
When I first read about it, it took me back probably 20 years now, when my primary care physician said to me, get a membership at the zoo. walk at the zoo. They got steps, they got hills, they got easy paths, and it's safe.
Well, the good news, Linda, thank you, is the zoo is on park property, so the zoo will also be part of this, so.
I think that is wonderful, and back to Lou's maps, it's accessible, and I look forward to having this pulled together. And my mind was going to, okay, if we get the data and it's integrated, how can we get insurance companies to see that as a positive for their patients?
Well, and in fact, that's where I come in for the studying and looking at value-based healthcare. And this is where it is going. And so hopefully we'll be able to get some funding actually from a grant from an insurance company to look at this data. I do think that it will change lives, and it is so accessible and safe that I believe that the citizens of Cincinnati will glom onto this and ask their doctors, if they're not at UC, why aren't we getting prescribed for this? So
exactly.
Kudos to UC Health for even branching into integrative medicine instead of just call it the typical prescription, cut, paste, whatever.
I know.
But you know, food, exercise, all those other things are
it's very,
very impactful.
Thank you, Brett. I'm going to take that back to them because it's, you know, changing a hospital system is almost like changing the government. So to have that is very exciting. And yeah, and we need both. No criticism there, but.
And I think there are some things already in place that complement this very well. I was thinking about the yes, that, and our program at Laurel Park, where we got the mapping out of the Ezra Charles train trail.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah, so we could have that in any park that says, here's a QR code to say how many miles you're gonna walk if you do this loop or whatever. So we can make it easy for people to do this.
We can, and in fact, there is an app that we're looking at from Parks RX that actually shows the patient can see the park and see what to do and do a QR code for them. So this could be, I think this could be really exciting, but it's the partnership that is so important. Two huge organizations working on this together, I think is incredibly exciting. So.
Well, I also applaud you and UC Health. I mean, this is what we should be talking about and opportunities for this. I made a note here. We have a community volunteer coordinator on staff here.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
It's this type of thing that we need to put into this system where we're looking for people that they're living, walking examples of what good this does to people's health, but also an opportunity to be our parks representative to help with this whole process of whatever you need to do to help us promote the program.
Great, and we can help with your website as well, putting on the benefits of health.
Absolutely.
So that might be kind of fun for people to look at as they find paths to walk and whatever, so.
One question, Kathy, how do you close the loop on the patients that they're actually taking their prescription? Is there a method to do that? Or, I mean, I would think it would be important for your data and your research to draw a cause of it.
Absolutely, and that is one of the areas that we'll have to work with both the parks and the staff at UCMC, which is why the app is so important because it's GPS run. So you can actually see that the patient walked a mile. But yes, we are looking at that. It might have to be sign-ins, you know, because obviously the data, the only reason the health UC Health is agreeing to this is for the research data that's coming and to make people feel better. But yeah, so thank you for that point. There are details that have to be worked out. I'm not telling you there aren't, but when we can leave here with a partnership that's high level and begin to hone down on those details, and as I say, we'll be raising the money, it can be very exciting. And a great brand, just saying.
Should it meet the commissioner's approval, I will offer a letter of sort of endorsement of a collaboration in this space for circulation and signature.
Kathy, let me take this opportunity also to thank you for the time that you spent sitting at this board and for your volunteer effort, and more importantly, for thinking of this organization to help partner with it. So thank you very much.
It was the only one that I thought of learning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, saving the best for last. We come to the Conservation and Land Management Team, not taking anything away from our prior presenters. But I think in the introduction to this, I said it is sometimes the quiet work of parks. So pleased to have with us today several members of the team and presenting Drew Goebel and Greg Torres about a lot of the work. And there are a few pages that will just highlight, not to read every word, but there's a lot of data here, as is always the way from everyone in DNR, because there's a lot of data to work with. That's how we make best practices and move things forward. But giving us some of the highlights and motivation of that, I'll turn it over to our CLN team. And I think we're gonna try this one. All right. Okay, all right.
Good afternoon, or morning, or wherever we are now.
We're still morning.
Good. So I'm Drew Goebel. It's Greg Torres. We work with conservation and land management. We're happy to be able to talk about that here today with you and go over just a little bit about what we've been doing for the last year or so. So this is what we hope to cover briefly. Me and Greg worked together in this department that was reformed about a year ago. So I'll touch briefly on the conditions of the forest, what we've seen, what we've surmised so far, our efforts to address the things so far that we've seen, and what we believe the solutions down the road need to be to do that. And then Greg.
Yeah, I'll talk about the trails. I'm the trail guy. So half my job is just to hike 65 miles of trails. So after done doing all that, I'll talk about the trail conditions, the signage, kind of the key priorities, which are the signage and trail infrastructure. And then we'll get into some other details.
Okay, so the assessment of the forest so far. So this is really blunt. Most of our forests are declining, they're dying in the condition that they're at right now. That's the assessment. That's the one sentence assessment of it. It's not, I don't like to say that, but that's what I believe. And when we're talking about our forests, we're talking about the majority of the property that the parks has, okay? That's what we're dealing with, right? And what do I mean by that? So there's several threats. You know, some of them you're probably well aware of. We talked about honeysuckle earlier. That's a big problem. That's one that I think is on our radar. We understand that. There's other invasive species too. We're finding new ones every day in the forest. The types of land use that we have are another threat to the forest. And the way that we go about changing that requires careful thinking over the long term, okay? We do have good areas of forest within our system, we do. And what I mean by that when I say that is that's a forest that has a diverse community of plants. Okay, that's a forest that's reproducing itself, right? These aren't static things. When we look out the window and we look at this assemblage of plants, that's just a snapshot, right? So for that to be there 100 years from now, 200 years from now, it has to reproduce itself, right? The trees have to create baby trees and on and on and on. When we have invasive species in there, they're interrupting that process. It's not happening any longer the way that it would in absence of them. We see this all the time. If we have a volunteer event and we remove an acre of honeysuckle, we walk through the forest, we don't find new trees growing. Okay, they can't reproduce themselves in these conditions, or we find very few. Okay, so and that extrapolates all the way up the food chain to the insects and the other animals that depend on them. So that's kind of state this things. The good spots that we have, let's say California woods, for instance, if you all have been out there, if you haven't been out there, go out there right now. It's beautiful. This is the time to see that place, right? Yes, it's exploding with wildlife. It's exploding with wildflowers. It's amazing. It's a gem. Buttercup Valley, the same thing. The reasons why we have those places is because volunteers and staff, but largely volunteers, have helped us manage those for decades. Whether we know it or not, that's what's been going on. That's why they still exist. Somebody's been out there working in them, fighting for them. That's what it takes to have those. Okay, so what have we been up to then since we've formulated this department? There's a lot of work already going on, right? We have the CPACs we've been talking about. There's volunteer groups all over the city that know the things that I'm telling you today already, you know, and they've been wanting to act and have been acting. Where are they acting? What are they doing? Is it the right thing? You know, we've gone out and met with these groups, coordinating their efforts to have them pulled together into a conscious plan. That way, the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. We're working in the areas that are the most appropriate, the highest priority areas. We're using the best methods, and we have some kind of data that we're collecting where we know where we're headed. At least we have a goal, and we know where we've been. That's in of itself is, you know, herding, you know, all of these groups together and figuring all that out is a task of itself. And as I said, we have to have careful planning and monitoring if we're going to manage these lands. It's not as easy as, okay, here's a bunch of soils, we know honeysuckle's a problem, go get it. Because when we go out and we touch the woods, we have to pay attention to the way that we do it. We have to pay attention to what happens afterwards. We have to come back, we have to look at the same properties again over time, over the whole season, over many seasons, to know that what we're doing is having the effect that we want, right? It's kind of like if you wanted to build a house, you can't just get a bunch of hammers and then get a bunch of people and say, go. It has to be done in just the right way, right? The right skill sets. Okay, so in that vein, we've been going out, we've been doing vegetation surveys of the land that we have. To my knowledge, this has not been done in the past on the scale that's being done now. This is where we get the data to know what's been done so far, what's the state of the land, what's a priority area, what's not a priority area, what's a safe area for volunteers to be working, what's maybe a better area for contractors to be working. These types of things, that's what you get. You gotta go out, you gotta bushwhack through all this stuff to get these answers. And we've been doing a lot of that in the forests, on the trails, a lot of that, right? A lot of that. Volunteers have been helping us as well. We've been interviewing previous managers, we've been interviewing volunteers to understand what we're looking at, understand the site histories of all of these places. That way we're confirming that we are seeing what we think we're seeing. The culmination of that is creating management plans on how we're going to move forward with addressing some of these issues to improve the health of the forests over the next several years in each park. We set goals into those and we work towards those goals and then assess if we're getting there or we're not. And that's in coordination with the CPACs. Okay, so we have to meet with them too and say, does this line up with what you're doing? Get their buy-in on that, which, you know, have to build that relationship, right?
Just to jump in real quick, some of these CPACs have culminated because of conservation work, right? They didn't exist before. For example, Miles Edwards Park, the trails were just a mess, all overgrown with invasive species. You couldn't access this park. One volunteer from the community stepped up, started contacting us. We engaged with this person. I went out there personally, walked with him several times to just kind of wrap our head around this problem, start developing a management plan for him. And now he's really leading, he's created his own CPAC with some other community members. And now they're actively out there clearing back the trails, starting to address some of the other invasive species problems. We've formulated a 3-part weekend workday series just a couple months ago with UC students, and we knocked back a lot just with this one fellow's help. And so some of these CPACs are forming around conservation. That's what they want to do. They're seeing a honeysuckle, they're getting alarmed, and they want to take action.
Yeah, exactly. And this type of management, it's not something that is a luxury, right? This is something that is necessary. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, maybe you could pick a spot of land and say, we're setting this aside, that's a preserve. We don't have that ability anymore. with all of the pressures of invasive plants, development, everything else that's happened, all the disturbances that have happened, we have unmanaged land, it's not going in the direction that we want. So it's a necessary component of just having the land and treating it properly.
Oh, this is me. All right, so my assessment was, like I said, 65 miles of trails, some way worse than others. Overall, this is a blunt assessment for you. They're fair to poor. They're not great trails. There are a couple of really great trails, but generally speaking, the trail system is not in great shape. There's a number of reasons for this. One, it's an ancient trail system. I mean, ancient as far as American cities go. Some of our trails are 100 years old. With no systematic maintenance done on even a good trail that was laid out properly for 100 years, it falls into decline and actually has to be put to rest. So that's what I've been doing. I've been going out looking at all the trails. And you can kind of see the picture on the left, to the bottom left there, that is actually one of our nature centers. And all the plants on the left and right of that is honeysuckle. This is early in the season, so it's just starting to leaf out now. But you're walking through a corridor of pure honeysuckle. That's not a native plant, so there's no ecological value there. There's nothing to teach kids or the rest of the community about at our nature centers when it's a wall of honeysuckle you're walking down. So you can see the other picture there, that's a trailhead. That's overgrowth at the trailhead at Mount Storm. So when it's me walking to this trail, I get to this trail, I think this is a trail, right? And then I have to bushwhack through that. So that's the state of a lot of our trails right now. What we've done, what I've done, first and foremost, is try to standardize a maintenance and construction system. So I've made these huge documents. I think they're added to the list of documents you all got. But it's basically setting the standard for where we're going to go from here forward, both with maintenance and new construction of trails. It's a big document, but it's primarily there's a handbook for volunteers, for staff, for contractors to always be referencing back to this, because this is where we're going to go with our trails. It's a standard that is useful for volunteers. You don't need heavy equipment to do it. It's all hand tools, the standards, the way they're laid out. It's all accessible. So that's a key thing for me, especially. So we're getting away from stairs, building stairs up the hill. We're going to go along the contours of hills so that you have an easy egress and access into the trail system. Beyond that, the next thing that I kind of tackled, which I'll get into in the next slide, I'll just skip it for now, but overgrowth of invasive species. Also, there's a manifold problem here because it makes the trails unsafe. If people can't see through the woods, if people can't feel comfortable walking down a trail, they're not going to use those trails. And in fact, the people who do end up using those spaces are unsavory folk usually, and they're doing things in the woods that you don't want them to do. What we found, remove the honeysuckle, you open up the trail corridors, now people will start walking through it because they can see, they feel comfortable in these spaces. So we're improving the safety just by improving the trail corridors and removing the honeysuckle. Drew's work and I are closely tied because you can't address the trail until you first address the invasive species that are crowding the trails. So my first issue, as I was walking around 65 miles, I was getting lost. Right. And without the help of a GPS system and Arcadis maps, I would have easily gotten lost. One of the most heartbreaking comments I saw on our Facebook page was an elderly man that had been walking around in Mount Airy his entire life, that has recently had some heart conditions. And he wasn't able to take the long hikes. He was able to take short hikes, but his concern was that without signage, he was worried about getting lost out in the woods and not being able to find his way out. That bothered me a lot, okay? So the first thing that I noticed, and with additional input, was that we need better signage all around. So I did a signage assessment. You can see at the top, those are Caldwell Park and Seymour Park. All the yellow dots are places where we need trail markers. In addition to that, I also identified where we might need kiosks for like mapping or park rules, because sometimes you get to these parks and there was no information. In fact, some of the parks didn't even have a park sign that said you were in a Cincinnati park. So I also documented that on the mapping system as well. Did a lot of research on good trail signage and that, did a lot of research on trail standards and all of that. We researched, planned, and started designing the trail marker system. You can see the trail marker there with that. We're going with symbols and colors. We're getting away from words because not everybody reads. or they read different languages. And so this is a very simple, we went with colors too, because some people are colorblind. So very simplified system of trail orientation. We're starting to unroll that now in the first 6 parks. In addition to that, we've worked with facilities, a great carpenter over there named Paul, who's developed these kiosks. And we are installing the first 6 kiosks now in the first 6 parks. So this is the one at Mount Echo, which just was installed like 2 weeks ago. So that's where we're going with the signage package. Beyond, this is what I was finding with the signage, like it's kind of all over the place. I don't know. And some of them are even contradictory, like city employees only. And then later it says you can park here if you have a dog on a leash. I don't understand. So it's confusing. So we've been working kind of with CEV to like streamline some of the signage and some of our rules. As the police officer here said earlier, we need signs for them to be able to point to then hold people accountable. So without these signs and without the proper rules, we're actually having more harm done to our forests because people are just doing whatever they want. Beyond that, we're working with the naturalists. They're developing an interpretive signage as well. So part of my hike, I'm also a naturalist, an interpretive guide. So beyond just hiking, I'm trying to identify places where like there might be some natural things to talk about, historical aspects, just interesting features to talk about. Also coordinating with Matt DeBona, who's the Cages Wiz kid over there. He's doing great work with the mapping system. I'm sure you all know about this. So what we're doing is, as I'm hiking these trails, we're identifying loops or like linear trails. We're giving this new mapping system and signage, and then he's adding that to our mapping system. So to your point about having the prescriptions and people being able to identify trails, as long as we get the trail information to you, we're working on that. Yeah, we're on that. And that's a great program. I did a similar thing in South Florida, and we actually saw great results with obesity going down. So yeah, keep it up. Yeah. Beyond that, the second biggest issue is trail clearance. As I said, walking down these trails, and it was actually deterring people from walking down the trails. So we're prioritizing this as the next step. We recently hired a bunch of seasonals, and this is what they're doing yesterday, today, forever. They're going to be cutting back all the honeysuckle, treating the honeysuckle. Once it's treated, it's not coming back. So this is a maintenance thing. We do this once, we do it well, right? We clear back the trails. From then forward, it's just maintaining it, right? And between two of us, we have to make this like a maintainable thing. So the initial work's a bear. After that, it's going to be a lot easier. Yeah. So, for the trail clearance, we're going to prioritize the nature centers first. Those are our front-facing doorways to the community. We've got kids programs, summer camps coming up pretty soon. So we've been working at La Boida Woods intensively over the last couple of weeks just to clear their trail corridors so that, again, kids can walk down this, the naturalists have things to talk about around them, and you just feel generally more comfortable. So that's La Boida Woods. That's just in the last couple of days what we've been doing. You talk about that.
Did you want to say about drainage?
No, I don't know. No.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so we've done a lot of volunteer work over the last year. These are some of the numbers on that. I'll say that we're at capacity with as many volunteer events as we can possibly get to. We're getting to right now. Yes, so 73 events last year. And
two of us, 73 events last year, and these are always weekends. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
So yeah, which is getting back to what Lou was saying earlier, and what you all are recognizing is there is something going on every weekend. This is one of the things that's going on every weekend in multiple parks at once. Every weekend. So those efforts have to be coordinated to increase that capacity any further. We have to have more volunteer coordinators. We just would, because I know you're at capacity probably as well. And the way that everything rolls out, like we have to do this type of work a certain way. So that's another standard that we've been working on a lot is training, which I'll get into in a minute. Actually, I'll get into it right now.
Numbers, man, those are great numbers,
Yeah, I can almost see them. This is 7,000 volunteer hours. This is specifically for conservation
Yes.
work. Yes, over the last year. So one of the first things that we did, we got a lot of people that want to volunteer. We got a lot of enthusiasm. We're trying to focus that enthusiasm in the right direction to get the right outcome, right? So we've been cutting honeysuckle for a long time. We want to make sure that when we do that, we're cutting the right plants, right? So there's a training element in there. If we're cutting the wrong plants, we're actually not getting the outcome that we want. We're setting the forest back. We want to use herbicide on the plants. That there's training that has to go into that as well. We've developed a volunteer program to be able to do that. We've trained several volunteers to do that, and they've put in a lot of time doing that activity with really good results in many parks. We've also been working with training the staff. So we've held, I don't know how many staff trainings, but we've trained at least once all of the operations staff with the exception of waterfront. They will be part of the training eventually. They weren't prioritized in the beginning because they're not as connected to forest as everyone else. And so these trainings were focused on all of the things I'm talking about. So proper plant identification, proper techniques, the proper way to use herbicide. And even more importantly, I think, is why. Why are we doing this? Like, if we don't have an understanding of why we're doing this, it's not seen as something that's important. If it's seen as busy work, then it's going to be the drudgery. It's going to be things people don't want to do. Okay, so we're trying to turn something that has been perceived that way into what it actually is, which is one of the most necessary things that needs to happen to keep our forest going. I think we've had really positive feedback.
Yeah, I think that some of these workers you're seeing on this, they've been working for 15, 30 years in some cases, and they have never received any training on the honeysuckle removal work days that they were in charge of working. So it was kind of enlightening, especially for them, because they'd never heard any of this stuff before. They didn't know the why of what they were doing, which I don't know for you, but if I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then I will not do it. So to Drew's point, it really gets them better motivated and understanding of why they're doing it. And it really kind of, it gets them excited. We got a lot of great feedback from all of the operations crews about our training that we held with them.
So a quick question. The staff that you're training, are you using them then to be coordinators for volunteers? Or are you using them? Am I setting you up?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Go right ahead.
So both. Yeah. So they were already, honeysuckle removal has been part of winter work for quite some time. So on the one hand, we want that to be done as standardized as possible across the system, so we know why we're getting what results we're getting and good results. The other aspect to it is it increases our capacity to do the volunteer events the right way, which is what we have here. So this was a National Public Lands Day. So September 25th of last year at Mount Echo. So we went ahead of this event. We worked with the operations crew there. We took them through this training. We explained to them all the things that we're talking about now. We also talked about volunteer dynamics.
Yeah, volunteer engagement. One thing we're really getting away from, we get these volunteer days and our crews would start up chainsaws and start buzzing stuff down. All the community engagement ends right there. As soon as the machine starts, the conversation, the building camaraderie with the community members ends right there. So we're telling them, as far as honeysuckle removal days, no more machine tools. We're gonna work side by side with hand tools with these people. So it's,
it's a change because it's the focus is building a community there, getting the right outcome, and then having them come back.
Yeah, quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is they're not allowed to use chainsaws, right?
Well, if staff is using it at an event though, a community member is not going to approach, I hope, a staff member running a chainsaw to ask them, is this the right plant? Am I cutting? You know what I mean? It kind of creates that barrier. To go back to it, we trained staff. We had a very successful event. We walked around, obsessively looking for collateral damage. I was very happy to only see a couple trees that were not supposed to be cut, and that was with almost 100 volunteers.
Yeah, this was, I think it was close to like 120, 150 volunteers, right? We cleared about 2 acres. But we did it effectively because we trained our staff first ahead of time so that they could then take smaller groups and work with them individually. We got great results at Malaco with this one workday. I invite you all, go take a hike again right now because you can clearly see what has happened there with this type of process.
It should be noted too that the other, this was the educational component of it. So Explore Nature came and supported this. So this was 3 groups of people, 2 groups were always working. 1 group went on a hike where they explained the importance of the forest, the importance of the work we're doing. So we're giving that back to the volunteers too, and not just saying, come do the work for us, come do the work for us. Yeah. And we've been fortunate to have 5 seasonal staff. We just got the 5th one started this week, yes. And so we're investing a lot of training into these folks so that we can build that kind of capacity, so that we can have more people with the specialized knowledge at events on the ground, whether it's doing just trail clearing, which is a huge need, but also all the more specialized things that need to happen. And we're going here.
Yeah. So yeah, in addition to this, I've got a long background in parks, but in a different state. I was a programmer, so and an educator. So my idea is always to activate our parks, get people into our system, right? That's what you want to do, right? That's what we all want, is people in our parks. The way to get to them though, as Drew mentioned, most of our parks are forests. It's trails, right? So how do you get people on trails? First thing, I'm putting this at the bottom because this is my personal philosophy. All parks programming comes from caring for our natural resources first, right? Without having the natural resources in good shape, that's what gives me a little bit like pause with your program. And I love the idea, but our trails aren't in great shape. And so we need to get them in better condition so that we can have great programs like the UC initiative that you brought forth and some of these other programs. So you can see what I've started to do once we get some of these trails cleared back. We worked with several high schools. We've gotten some high schoolers out there. A couple of weeks ago, we had about 30 high school kids for 2 weeks going to various parks, hiking, mostly just hiking the trails and helping us with some surveying. I gave them a presentation on wildflowers, and then they helped us go canvas the forest for the wildflowers, because this is our first year. We don't know what we have out in the woods yet. So the more data we can get back from anybody on what's out there is helpful. So we're using the kids, students to help us gather this data and teaching them along the way. You all have already heard about the Be Well Adaptive Hiking Program. Foundation put that together, but it wouldn't have really gone off well without us helping clear back some of the trail corridors. Once that is done, what a fantastic program. Adaptive hiking is fantastic. I think it's the first time I ever heard it in a park system. In addition to that, you can see me over there giving some volunteer appreciation interpretive hikes, right? Our volunteers give a lot to our community, a lot, but I'm passionate about giving back something to them, right? And building this community together, teaching them so that they in turn can teach us what they know about their local parks. So that's what I was doing. We've set up a partnership with CEB, Urban Forestry, CLM, Parks Florist, the Cincinnati Park Foundation, all these different groups that come together to offer up some volunteer appreciation, like hikes or engagements. Part of that also is teaching them some skills. So like, for example, the Urban Forestry will learn how to do some tree pruning for, the volunteers will when they go for that event. We also got some conservation land management partners, community partners. This is, as Lou was saying, I think he stepped out, but our community partnerships is really where it's at. It helps us carry out our mission. It helps us build trust in the community. It also allows us to access communities that maybe haven't been accessed before. Maybe we don't have a real good avenue to get into. So here we go. Civic Garden Center. Sam was here earlier talking about this great project. I know you all have heard about it before, the tree forestation project. Really, it's students growing trees, removing the invasive species with a little bit of guidance and education. And they literally have reclaimed 10 acres of park property in about 3 or 4 years. There's now a trail system that runs through. We just recently installed the trail markers and a kiosk. So it's really getting set up as a new park that previously, about 6 years ago, was just invasive species and nobody went in there, and trash.
So yeah, they're doing a lot with the tree forestation, the walnut woods, but also they're helping us with invasive plant research. With these students, we've posed a bunch of research questions for them to go out and start answering some of these research questions and getting them back to us. In fact, recently there was a new ant discovered in Walnut Woods, new to Ohio, and it was documented. And so that's really good research. We didn't know this before. By a student at that high school, right? Pretty cool.
Did he get to name it?
No, it occurs in other states, so it already has a name, but yeah, it was the first time found here in Ohio. Pretty cool. But we didn't know this before because nobody's been in the woods before looking at this stuff. In addition to that, the Civic and Garden Center has been helping us with a lot of volunteer engagement, and we have plans to work with them together for education, to build out more education throughout the community. Another great partnership, Groundwork Ohio River Valley. I'm sure you've heard of GORE before. Last year, we had an 8-week program. We employed 50 high school students, and they did a lot of invasive species removal in a number of parks, including Mount Airy, Drake, Monaco, a bunch of parks. They did pretty good, and hopefully we'll see them back this year. We're going to have 60 students back this year in a couple of months, starting in June, and we're going to set up the same kind of activities for them to help us.
60 students from where?
They're from all over the city. They're high school
What is the program? What is
It's the green.
Yeah, it's the green
leaf program.
Green leaf program, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they're doing some great work. Can't wait to get started with them again. In addition to that, we've got other community partners that we're talking about. Scouts are always a real mainstay for us. They've done some real great work already this last year, building some trails. There's a new boardwalk built at Badgley Run. Fantastic boardwalk and trail. So we've got 4 other projects in the works, and we'll formalize this relationship more and get more of them in. Other community partners, I will list. Ohio Invasive Plant Council, University of Cincinnati, Hamilton County Soil and Water, Walnut Hills High School, St. Xavier High School, General Electric, Cincinnati Heights. There's a bunch of partners that we're working out with, and even more that reach out to us to get engaged with these green spaces, right? Here.
Yeah, so big picture, right? So we're starting at a state of things where we have a lot of interest in this topic, a lot of interest in doing this work. And we have a lot of community members that are willing to help us. We're very fortunate to have amazing volunteers, that have expert knowledge. Some of them, we learn from them every day, okay, to put it mildly. The direction we're trying to take these things in is the direction that the common understanding is already going. Like we're sailing with the wind here. And some evidence of that is, recent social media stuff that Parks has done surrounding these topics. The video on tree of heaven removal that we're doing in Burnett Woods had 1 million views, which is the most of any Parks social media thing, right? Yeah, ever.
By far.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we get tremendous interest anytime we put out this stuff. Tons of questions, tons and tons of energy into this. And so what we're trying to do is do this the right way. And I don't know, help me out
Just
here.
build capacity. I mean, we've got thousands of acres to deal with. And like I said, 65 miles of trails, even with 5 seasonals, it's just a tremendous amount of work. These are seasonals. We're gonna work with them and train them up to a high level of understanding, and then they're gone. And then we're gonna maybe, I don't know what the funding looks like, but maybe we get more, and then we gotta train them all to a high level again. And then as long as they're seasonal, we're never gonna build in the staff capacity to actually address these in a systematic and long-standing way. So I just wanna put that in your head. Like I said, I don't know where the funding comes from. I'm not a numbers guy. I hate numbers, but that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about these are seasonal employees. In a few months, they're gone, and it's back to 2 of us.
Yes, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, totally. It's a long-term game. Like there's no short-term, there's no get rich quick with this. It's long-term. We have to continuously do it. We have to continuously invest in it. And building the capacity in-house, at least partially, I think is one of the best ways to do it. You won't get that out of, there's contractors that can do this work. Yes. It's a different story if you have somebody that knows the land, that's there all the time, that knows where everything is at, that knows this forest specifically. It's totally different, totally different. It's irreplaceable.
The last thing I'll just say too, and I'll be done talking, but our forests, in my opinion, are not only this Parks Department's greatest asset, but it's one of the greatest assets that this city has, right? There's not very many cities in this country our size that have forests, our size forests, like a Mount Airy, a Greeno Woods, just sitting there, right? We're very fortunate to still have these green spaces. The sad part is they're not in great condition, and we really need to just care for them. The more we can care for them, I believe firmly that the programming will all grow. Everything else will start to grow if we care for the land first. That's kind of where I'm at. I'll be done. But yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So guys, what can we do to help you? What if you're here, you've got your time in front of us sitting here. Tell us what you need. What can we do?
Well, I'm really happy that we have the 5 people now that we were just discussing. We're going to have an impact with those people, throughout their season. But unless there's continued support over an extended period of time, the stuff we're doing is just, it's going to become undone.
It's a flash in the pan.
It's a flash in the pan, and a lot of this work is front loaded. Most of it's at the beginning, and then there's ongoing maintenance. But we'll never even get over that hump without a long-term commitment to this type of work over an extended period of time.
If you want a direct ask, I think honestly, you could get another Drew and you can get another me, right? No, I'm serious. And then on top of that, some funding towards some of our ideal projects. Like we have in mind water nursery, right? You're sitting there as a nursery for annual production. We want to turn that into a native plant nursery. And even if it's not at Water, maybe it's at Deal Road or Mount Airy or something, we would love to start a native plant nursery. We already have the volunteer support for that. We even have people who would fund it. That's already out there. As we're cutting these invasive species, what we have to do is then purchase plants to put them back in here. If we started gathering seeds from our own forests, right, and building volunteer programs to have these kids or have other volunteers grow them for us, then we can just start turning around and putting the same trees back into the restoration sites that we're developing. Does that make sense? It's a cyclical thing and it's all kept in-house. There's tremendous ability to build programming, educational opportunities, engage schools in that way. Just the same as like that Walnut Hills High School is like turned a 10-acre site into a park. We could do that all over the city with some more support, especially around like a native plant nursery.
Can I add?
Yeah.
And that's also a best practice. That ideally, that's what we would be doing. We're talking like preserving these genetics. That would be how we would do it. It's also overcoming a bottleneck to our work. It's hard to source native plants that are appropriate. We spend an inordinate amount of time trying to do that, and we get 5% of what we try to get. It's
our plant contracts make it difficult. We've got very few vendors to go to, and because of that, they're not native plant vendors, so it's difficult to get those plants.
And if you mention the idea of this work, there's tremendous amount of interest in this work too. I was at a volunteer event Saturday at Burnett Woods, and we talked about the idea of, it'd be good to propagate. All of the volunteers around me said, how can we help with that? We would love to do that. How can we? And this is everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, there's a lot of energy around what we're doing. I'd love here's what I want to do. I want to get all of you all out on a hike.
Yes.
That's not an idle request either. I really want to see that happen. So
2 at a time.
Yeah. Huh?
2 at a time.
2 at a time.
We don't talk to each other.
We'll do a lot of hills through your window and can't talk.
Yeah. But I think you get the idea of what we're trying to accomplish. I think you see the momentum that we have underfoot, and I really just hope hoping you all will just continue to support. Thanks.
That conservation list we have. We also have one of the smallest budgets, smallest need to do so. So all that work is largely on volunteer coordination. But even if you can get 1,000 volunteers out there, you still have to have the professionals in the field to guide that work. And so as they noted, investment and volunteer coordinators like Crystal Johnson Roberts is one. An army of millions. We've been able to add Drew and Greg with the concept that we're weekend after weekend after weekend. It's on the weeds of the weeds of that between Garrett and I, Garrett's a land manager who works, to come up with that direct ask to better inform what the plan should be going forward.
Well, I want to thank, starting with Crystal and Garrett, you two, this is one of the most important roles of the park department, park district, park system here in Cincinnati. And I can make sure
you guys are know what you're talking about, who have obviously worked extremely hard. The solution has got to be to do out there over the course of so many years. It's just it's been building up. You know, hate to. And then the focus on probably, you know, parroting what you guys have said, but we spend so much time thinking about bricks and mortar and parks. You know, we got our $72 million, you know, hole that we got to dig out of, but without the green stuff, you know, there really isn't any park. So I think, you know, to put it on a level playing field is this stuff is absolutely, if not more important, because otherwise it's just another building and a bunch of honeysuckle, you know, which isn't very exciting. So I think for us to have that kind of balance of, yeah, we got to take care of the bricks and mortar, but more importantly, you gotta, I don't know what you can do if a forest totally declines. It would be generations to bring it back if it could ever be. So that's something that we don't want to really lose the grasp and lose it forever. And so, you know, whatever we can do within our limited capacity here in our sports.
I don't think I have that calibrated appropriately in my mind. And these things are so important. And thinking about the educational potential that is compromised when this isn't in place. And so it becomes extremely important. We focus a lot on the front facing things, but this is critically important. I appreciate all the work you do, the enthusiasm and the education that it brings to us around this issue. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. We are to director comments.
That is a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
But I will do my best. I will also be concise. Parks is on TikTok.
And if you're ancient like me and don't know what that is a social media platform focusing on video. And it's added to our portfolio of Facebook, Reels, Instagram, and Twitter. And it does tend to skew, as I know, with the father of two 20-somethings, to the younger crowd. So we are on there. We are going to where the people are looking for us. So Parks is on TikTok. If you're a TikTok member, please follow us at Parks. Hiring. So on my first day in this role, I spent, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes with Deputy Director Mobley, familiarizing me with what the hiring process is. And speaking of the purchasing process earlier, I didn't count the number of steps, but I do know I stopped taking notes at a page and a half. It is a lengthy and complicated process. And inappropriate. I'm not taking a shot at the process, there's just a lot to it. When I started, we had, let's say, another 23 to 25 vacancies, somewhere in that range. Derek Gentry joined us in February and has been a whirlwind of activities, supported by others as well. It's not a one-person show, but Derek has had enormous success. And by May 1st, we're going to have 9 new full-time staff joining our team and hoping to fill 4 more positions in the month of May. So that's 50% of our vacancies have been addressed in a 60, 90-day period. So many hands make lighter work. I still can call it light work. There's a lot of work to do, but it's even harder when you're at half strength. So shout out to Derek and the whole team, but delighted to have that group in place. That's where the good news on staffing ends. Seasonal staff. Oof, that's a biggie. You saw a sign as you came in. We are now hiring seasonal staff. What it accurately should have said is we are now desperately trying to hire seasonal staff. This is not unique to us. Anybody in a seasonal and labor hiring environment understands the pressure. We have some private sector folks don't have as much. So we're constrained. The city as a whole is aware of sort of a mismatch between what we can pay and what the market is offering. So they are looking at some options, but as of right now, we are kind of salary capped at an amount that is meaningfully lower than you can do throwing boxes for Amazon. So that's a challenge. We're working on that. Continuing to, in all different areas of the operation, pull toward that. You heard about the benefit of having seasonal employees, but it is hard to attract and retain them. So heads up with that. And I have a few events to make you aware of. Arbor Day on the morning of April 29th. We'll be hosting our official Arbor Day recognition at the Hayes Porter School. We'll have a mayoral proclamation read by the vice mayor. I believe Councilmember Owens indicated she will be there as well. And probably some others that will come up on the afternoon of the 28th, but on the morning of the 29th, there will be an Arbor Day event, and you're encouraged to attend if you're available. Mayor's Corporate Challenge. We've been working with Mayor FDA's office. That is on Friday, May the 13th. We have 20 sites identified, and the mayor has sort of expressed a refreshed vigor to participate in that and kind of restore that to what it had been. Since then, he has some additions to his family that might divert his attention personally a little bit, but we have a excitement around that event on Friday, May the 13th. And bring your kids to work day. Parks partnered with CRC to develop some programming. And I'm not going to take any credit here. Jenny Mobley was key in getting that sort of put together, what we can do on April 28th. One of the venues we've got for city employees is Smell Park. We've got some fun programming, as you saw from Lucian's presentation. We do fun well, so we anticipate being one of the highlights for kids to participate in bringing your kid to work day on April the 28th. And lastly, I have a note. So we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Chrome Conservatory being reopened. May 8th, 2021 is when it reopened after the first, you can't really talk about the pandemic coming in end yet, but we reopened on May the 8th, and we are on track for an all-time record in 1 year of 1.7 million in revenue coming out of Chrome. So that is, Mark House and his team have been working with the CEV team with just using a really accelerated and refreshed marketing strategy to drive attendance. Butterflies of the Nile show. I drive by most mornings on my way in, and there's a reasonable line, not an unpleasant line, but a line that expresses interest in there, even on most weekdays. So it is going great, and that's an eye-popping number that we felt was worth sharing. So that is what I have, unless you have questions.
I just want to continue to thank you for the role that you're filling for us here. I know you've given us a lot of your time, and we want to be mindful and just appreciate what you've done stepping in and helping us out through this interim period. I know that we're bumping, well, I know we're pushing our luck with you on your commitment to us, but I want to thank you for all that you've done during that time. And also take an opportunity to thank the staff for everything that's going on. And I tell you, these meetings get long sometimes, but when we hear the stories and really get into what you guys are doing and the enthusiasm that you have for your job, and Derek for being able to hire some more people to help these people, thank you very much. I mean, it's a tough road out there, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing.
I should say Leslie's been a huge help, but she's helped me here in HR. So.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, we have commissioner comments or any items you want to bring up. I'll go to Mrs. Castellini first. Do you have anything that you would like to bring up?
I just want to thank all the folks that presented today. There was a lot of good news. We heard a lot of good news, and that was very exciting. And so I do thank you for the enormous efforts. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try and help these folks hire the people they need to hire and get the money to them that they need to have through whatever fund it's available out of.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for, I know you're out of town traveling, but even when you do that, you're always very diligent and zooming in for us. So thank you for your time. Brad, anything you would like to add?
Just the thought that came up during your guys' presentation. You had said that California Woods was really retained in its, in a more healthy condition through decades of volunteer work. And that just kind of struck me as, what is it? I know we're working for something to, get the rest of our forest in shape. So, you might want to think about what would that look like? I mean, how many volunteer hours? How long would it take? What is the lift to get and then keep, our forest in a good condition? I have no clue. I don't know how far away we are. I know it's a far away, but sometimes to have at least a somewhat of a defining endpoint gives us maybe a bit more ability to work towards that. So anyway, I know you hate numbers and
No,
I'm with you.
We started with one park called Badgley Run that was a wasteland, and throughout this last year, we've documented all the numbers you're looking for. So,
and within that board report too, there's a pretty solid recap of all the hours and breakdown, the cost equivalency for the volunteer hours as well.
Okay.
So definitely check that out.
Okay.
All I'll say is, this has been incredibly informative meeting. I just want to thank all of the presenters. And what I really appreciated was being specific about the ask. So we can know how we can better support you and what it is we might do differently or consider to get to the point that we all want to get to. And I just appreciate your enthusiasm and your commitment to the work you do. The staff, the volunteers, CPACs, everybody who comes together to make this whole thing work, because it takes all of us. And I appreciate that.
Well, you'd be surprised, I have no further comments to add today to our meeting. But I do want to I make a motion to adjourn into executive session. Should be similar to the, that's not right there.
Just a second. Our internet connection is of questionable stability. So should it cut out during would it be fair to say that the only business of the board after executive session would be to
adjourn?
There
will be no further business that we're
just getting shaky on the connection.
Gotcha. So with that, I would move under revised code section 121.22 paragraph G to go into executive session to discuss the appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee or official. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. Can you read the call the roll, please?
President Getz?
Yes.
Vice President Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini?
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Very much, and thank you, all of you, for today and your.
Thank you, appreciate it.